The blue toy phone I had secretly given my 6-year-old grandson rang at 11:47 on a blizzard night. "Grandpa, please help me," he whispered. "I'm cold. I'm hungry." They left me alone again. When the call cut off, I drove through the storm to my daughter's house. My son-in-law blocked the door. "The boy is asleep. Go home, old man." But through the hallway crack, I saw a faint blue light glowing under a locked bedroom door, and my hands went cold. "I appreciate you being here with me today." Before we begin, leave a quick comment below. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right, yes or no? Your perspective might help someone else reading this. Please note some details have been adapted for storytelling purposes. The core message, protecting the vulnerable, is what truly matters. The blue plastic toy phone vibrated against the mahogany desk at 11:47 on a December night when the temperature had already dropped to 8 below zero. I was in my second-floor study reviewing transaction spreadsheets, the kind most people would assume a 69-year-old widower could no longer comprehend, row after row of debits I had been tracking for months. Then the toy phone lit up. I kept it on the corner of my desk like a paperweight. Bright blue plastic sold in any toy aisle for $9. 6 months ago, I had slipped a working SIM card into the hollow battery compartment and registered it under a business entity my daughter would never think to search. The screen showed a number I recognized instantly. Ellis. I picked it up. Static crackled through the line wind howling in the background. "Grandpa, I'm so scared. Please help me." 6 years old. That voice should not sound like that. "Ellis, where are you? Where are your parents?" "They left again." His words came in hitching breaths. "It's so cold. I'm alone." "Stay on the line, buddy. I'm coming right now. Do you understand?" "Okay." A whisper. Then the line went dead. I was already moving. Coat, keys, wallet. I descended the stairs in the dark without turning on lights. Muscle memory from a house I had lived in for 42 years. My wife Eleanor had been gone 6 months. Pancreatic cancer 11 weeks from diagnosis to hospice. My daughter Lorraine tells people I have been losing my edge since the funeral. Forgetful. Repeating questions, struggling with dates. She is half right. I have lost my patience for liars. I spent 35 years as a forensic audit partner at Deloitte, tracking corporate embezzlement and wire fraud for Fortune 500 boards, who needed someone to find money their executives swore did not exist. I built a career on remembering every detail that did not add up. The senility is a cover. I have been playing confused since Eleanor's memorial service, and Lorraine bought it without question because it made her life easier. Easier to deflect the questions I kept asking about Ellis. Easier to explain why I could not see my grandson for weeks at a time. I opened the garage door. Snow whipped sideways through the opening, a wall of white that swallowed the streetlights. I climbed into my car. The engine turned over clean. The toy phone in my coat pocket felt heavier than it should. How does a man prepare to go to war against his own daughter? You do it the same way you prepare to testify against a CFO who embezzled pension funds. You gather evidence. You build the file in silence. You do not let anyone see you counting until the ledger is airtight. I had been gathering evidence on Brent Rawlings, my son-in-law, since the week after Eleanor's funeral. Brent is 45, a senior compliance manager at a regional bank. The kind of job that sounds impressive but pays far less than the lifestyle he maintains. Lorraine is 42, stopped working when Ellis was born. They live in a Skokie house they should not be able to afford. 6 months ago, I noticed a withdrawal from the education trust fund Eleanor and I established for Ellis. $47,000 coded as a qualified education expense. Ellis was 5 years old. He was not in any program that cost $47,000. So I started looking. I backed out of the garage into the blizzard. Visibility was near zero. The wipers could not keep pace with the snow. I did not slow down. The drive from Evanston to Skokie is 40 minutes on a clear night. I have driven through worse. Blizzards are predictable. You adjust your speed watch for brake lights. Family predators are not predictable. They rely on trust. They assume no one is paying attention. Brent assumed I was too old and too broken to notice. I merged onto I-94 southbound. The highway was nearly empty. Let me tell you what 35 years of forensic auditing teaches you about family theft. It is always incremental. It is always justified in the thief's mind. And it is always hidden behind plausible deniability. Brent did not steal $47,000 once. He has been pulling money from that trust account for 18 months. Small transfers at first. 5,000 here, 8,000 there. Coded as tutoring, medical expenses, educational materials. None of it real. I know because I built a tracking system 5 months ago. A Delaware LLC monitoring entity, encrypted and silent. Every time Brent moves money, I get a notification. Every withdrawal, every wire transfer, every casino marker cleared against that account. And there have been casino markers. Dozens of them. The toy phone was not a last-minute rescue plan. It was the final tripwire in a system I built the week after Eleanor's funeral. I told Ellis it was a game. A secret phone just for us. If he ever needed me, he could call. He called it the grandpa phone. Tonight, my grandson activated the system. The snow hammered the windshield. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text from the monitoring system. Another withdrawal attempt flagged and frozen by the trust's secondary authorization requirement I had quietly added 3 months ago. Brent was trying to move money. Tonight. During a blizzard. That meant he was panicking. Panicking people make mistakes. I had been watching them for 5 months. Every withdrawal, every wire transfer, every fraudulent expense report. I had the logs. I had the bank statements. I had casino surveillance photos a private investigator pulled from public records requests. I had everything except proof that Ellis was in danger. Now I had that too. The exit for Skokie appeared through the white. I took it without signaling. That call was not a cry for help. It was evidence. And I was about to add it to a file that would bury Brent Rawlings so deep he would never see daylight again. The porch light was off. That was the first thing wrong with a house where the porch light had burned every night for 15 years. I pulled to the curb at 2:15 in the morning, wipers scraping against snow that refused to stop falling. The house sat dark except for a faint glow somewhere deep inside. Lorraine always left the porch light on. Always. Tonight, it looked like someone did not want to be found. I climbed out into the cold and started up the walkway. The front door opened before my knuckles could touch the wood. Brent Rawlings stood in the threshold, 45 years old, broad-shouldered, with the smooth voice of a man who made his living convincing people to trust him with their money. He filled the doorway, completely blocking me. "Vernon, what are you doing here?" Ellis called me. "I want to see him." "The boy is asleep, old man. Stop imagining things." "He called me 30 minutes ago, scared. Said he was alone." Brent's jaw tightened. "You drove through a blizzard because you think you got a phone call. Ellis doesn't have a phone. He's 6. Let me see him." "No." Behind him, Lorraine appeared in the shadows. My daughter. 42 years old, her posture rigid, and her face pale in the dim light filtering from somewhere inside. She did not step forward. She just stood there, arms crossed. "It's 2 in the morning, Dad." Her voice was thin. "You drove here in a blizzard for nothing. Ellis is fine. He's asleep." "Then let me see him. 5 minutes." Brent shifted his weight, narrowing the gap. "You need to go home before you get yourself killed in this weather. You're not thinking clearly." In 35 years of forensic work, I learned to read a man's confidence. There is the confidence of innocence which welcomes scrutiny. And there is the confidence of preparation, which comes from rehearsing your story until every word lands exactly where you need it. Brent's confidence told me everything. He had been waiting for me. He knew I was coming. I leaned slightly, trying to see past his shoulder into the hallway. The house was dark except for a sliver of light toward the back. And then I saw it. A faint blue glow, low to the ground, seeping out from beneath a closed door at the far end. The toy phone, still lit, still on. Ellis's bedroom door, closed, at 2 in the morning. I just want to see him, I said. 5 minutes, Brent, then I'll leave. Not happening. He started to close the door. Go home, Vernon. Sleep it off. I put my hand on the door, not pushing, just holding. Who's visiting at 2 in the morning, Brent? His eyes narrowed. What? The gray sedan at the curb. Out-of-state plates. That's not your car. So who drove 40 minutes through a blizzard to be here right now? For the first time, his mask slipped. Just for a second. None of your business, he said. Go home before you get lost in this weather. I stepped back. I'm going, but I saw what I needed to see. Brent closed the door. The lock turned. The porch stayed dark. I walked back to my car, but I did not get in. Not yet. I pulled out my phone and photographed the gray sedan. Illinois plates, corporate fleet number visible in the corner. I zoomed in, captured the plate clearly, then opened the vehicle lookup app. 30 seconds later, I had the registration data. Leased vehicle. Corporate entity out of Wheaton, Illinois. A financial consulting firm I did not recognize. Who needs a visitor at 2 in the morning during a blizzard when a child is supposedly asleep? Someone who needs help cleaning up a mess. Fast. I climbed into my car and started the engine. The drive back to Evanston took 50 minutes through worsening conditions. My mind was already 3 steps ahead. Brent had known I was coming. He had called someone, and that someone had arrived before I did. I pulled into my garage at 4:23 in the morning. The house was silent. I climbed the stairs to my office and locked the door. The bookshelf on the north wall looked like every other retired executive's study. I reached behind the third shelf and pressed the concealed latch. The panel swung open. Inside a small commercial safe with a biometric lock. I pressed my thumb to the scanner. The bolt released. The encrypted drive sat in a foam-lined case. I pulled it out, connected it to my desktop, and entered the passphrase. The screen filled with data. 5 months of perfect surveillance. Every trust fund distribution flagged. Every suspicious withdrawal time-stamped. Bank routing numbers. Casino markers. Wire transfers to accounts I had traced but not yet identified. Transaction logs that painted a picture clearer than any testimony. 5 months of watching them steal from a 6-year-old, I said to the empty room. Every transaction logged, every dollar accounted for. This was not a rescue operation anymore. This was a prosecution. I opened my phone and pulled up Simone Garrett's contact. Simone had been my attorney for 12 years, sharp as a scalpel, and twice as ruthless when the case demanded it. I typed one line. Tomorrow morning, first thing, she replied in under a minute. I'll clear my calendar. I set the phone down and stared at the data on my screen. The gray sedan with corporate plates. The out-of-state registration. A financial consulting firm from Wheaton. I ran that license plate number through my phone before I even left the street. Gray sedan leased vehicle corporate registration out of Wheaton. I did not recognize the company name yet, but I recognized the pattern a professional called in to clean up a mess. Brent had phoned someone the moment that toy phone connected, and whoever answered had driven 40 minutes through a blizzard to get there before I did. By morning, I would know exactly who owned that vehicle and why they were so eager to protect Brent Rawlings at 2 in the morning. 8 hours after I sat staring at that encrypted drive, I walked into Simone Garrett's downtown Chicago law office, carrying it in my coat pocket. Simone Garrett, 56 years old, was a family law partner who had built her career on high-net-worth forensic divorces and had no tolerance for cruelty disguised as parental rights. I had used her for estate planning after Eleanor died. She knew what I did for 35 years at Deloitte. She knew I did not panic. She slid the reading glasses down from her forehead and opened the encrypted drive without a word, her silence filling the 22nd floor conference room like a held breath. I sat across from her and waited. She did not speak for 12 minutes. Just scrolled through spreadsheet after spreadsheet, transaction logs, wire transfer records, casino markers, offshore routing numbers. Her face gave away nothing. Finally, she closed the laptop. You have 5 months of unassailable bank data, she said. I can file today, but the court won't move on numbers alone. We need DCFS eyes inside that house. How long? Give me a timeline. She leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled. Emergency custody petition goes in this afternoon. DCFS investigation takes 2 to 3 weeks if we push hard. Home inspection interviews with the child, background checks. If the physical evidence matches this financial layout, we can have custody before early February. 10 weeks. Vernon. Can he hold out for 10 weeks? 10 weeks sounds like nothing until you are a 6-year-old sleeping in a locked room. He'll hold, I said. What else do we need? Everything you saw at that house. The locked door. The blue glow. That gray sedan. I want photos. Timestamps, witness statements if you can get them. And I want that toy phone. I pulled it from my other pocket. The blue plastic felt lighter than it should. Simone picked up her desk phone and pressed a single button. Kevin, I need you in Conference B. Bring your kit. 3 minutes later, Kevin Halstead walked in carrying a silver briefcase. The firm's retained digital forensics specialist, mid-30s, the kind of careful precision you see in people who handle evidence for a living. He handled the toy phone like it was evidence at a crime scene, which I realized it essentially was. What am I looking for? He asked. Call logs, Simone said. Timestamps, metadata, anything that shows when and how this device was used. Kevin pulled a cable from his kit and connected the phone to a laptop. His fingers moved across the keyboard without hesitation. I watched the screen fill with data I did not fully understand. Lines of code, system logs, network handshake records. Then Kevin stopped. 14 outgoing calls, he said quietly. All terminated within 3 to 7 seconds. All except one. My chest tightened. He tried to call me 14 times. Why didn't I know? Kevin turned the laptop toward me. Rows of timestamps. December 3rd, January 28th, March 15th. 11 others spread across 5 months. Because someone was actively blocking the signal, Kevin said. See these router logs? I pulled them from the metadata. Your grandson wasn't just being ignored, he was being jammed. Simone leaned forward. Explain. Smart home router with SIM blocking protocols enabled. Whoever set this up created an artificial firewall that identified the toy phone's SIM signature and killed any outgoing signal before it could reach a tower. The calls died in the air. They never had a chance to connect. There is a particular silence that falls over a room when you realize a child tried to call for help 14 times and every single cry died in the electronic void. I stared at the screen. Each timestamp was a night. Each night was a moment when Ellis sat alone in the dark, pressing buttons on a toy phone, believing his grandfather would answer. The blizzard night, I said. That one worked. Why? Kevin scrolled through the logs. The firewall was disabled that night. See router shows standard residential mode from 11:40 p.m. to 3:15 a.m. Someone forgot to re-enable it. Brent left the house, I said. He and Lorraine both. They left Ellis alone and forgot to turn the jamming back on. Simone's voice was flat. So the only reason you got that call was because your son-in-law made a mistake. I nodded. I could not speak. Kevin printed the report and slid it across the table. I picked it up. The timestamps were listed in clean columns. Dates, times, duration, status. December 3rd, 9:47 p.m. 4 seconds. Terminated. January 28th, 11:13 p.m. 6 seconds. Terminated. March 15th, 10:52 p.m. 7 seconds. Terminated. I remembered January 28th. I was in my home office that night analyzing a client's tax liability, completely absorbed in quarterly financial statements. 2 towns away, my grandson was whispering into a toy phone. I read each timestamp out loud to myself, barely above a whisper. 14 times he reached out into the dark. 14 times the signal died in the air. Simone let me sit with it for a moment. Then she spoke. This isn't passive neglect, Vernon. This is systematic technological abuse. Brent engineered your grandson's isolation. That moves this from family dysfunction into criminal territory. I set the report down carefully, my hands steadier than I expected. File the petition, I said. Today, and I want every shred of this in front of a judge. You'll have it. I stood to leave, but I could not stop staring at that list of dates. 14 attempts. 14 nights, a child sat alone in the dark, pressing buttons on a toy phone with absolute faith that his grandfather would answer. I had been hunting them with spreadsheets and encrypted databases, building the perfect forensic case. Tracking every dollar, every wire transfer, every fraudulent distribution. But while I was tracking their money, Brent was tracking something else entirely, my grandson's desperate attempts to reach me. And that gray sedan parked outside at 2 in the morning. The corporate registration from Wheaton, that was about to make perfect terrible sense. The corporate registration came back within 3 hours, and the name at the bottom of the leasing document made my jaw tighten with recognition. Cedric Farrell. Cedric Farrell's name appeared on the corporate leasing document as sole proprietor of a Wheaton CPA firm, 44 years old, Brent's college roommate, and the accountant whose signature had certified every fraudulent trust fund disclosure for 5 years. I sat in the back research room of Simone's office, staring at the screen while she stood behind me, reading over my shoulder. "You know him," she said. "Not a question. I know his signature. It's on every annual accounting report Brent filed with the probate court. Cedric Farrell, CPA, attesting under penalty of perjury that Ellis's trust was being properly managed." Simone leaned closer to the monitor. "And he's listed as Brent's emergency contact on 2 previous employment applications. College roommate, University of Illinois, class of 2003. I pulled up my LLC monitoring files and cross-referenced the dates. Every trust distribution that flagged as suspicious in my system had a corresponding accountant certification signed by Cedric Farrell. This is the man who signed documents swearing the funds were being used for Ellis's benefit," I said. "Educational expenses, medical care, proper fiduciary management. All lies, all notarized. And Brent had him at the house within an hour of that toy phone connecting," Simone added. "They weren't just stealing, they were coordinating. I know this breed of accountant. They are not criminal masterminds. They are lazy professionals who sign documents they do not fully understand out of old loyalty or easy money." Cedric probably told himself he was just helping an old friend navigate complex trust regulations. He probably never asked hard questions about where the money was actually going. But that signature made him complicit. And that gray sedan in the blizzard made him an active participant. "Can we use this?" I asked. "Absolutely. Professional misconduct. False certification. If the state licensing board doesn't strip his CPA credentials, I'll be shocked. And it establishes conspiracy. This wasn't one man acting alone. This was coordinated fraud with professional cover." Simone printed the vehicle registration and added it to the growing file. I drove home as the winter sun dropped below the skyline. My mind kept circling back to that gray sedan. Brent had called Cedric before I even pulled into the driveway. He had backup on speed dial. He had a network. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen, past 11, reviewing the DCFS petition Simone planned to file in the morning. The house was silent. The radiators ticked. Snow fell outside the window. My phone rang. Unknown number, unlisted. I answered without speaking. "Dad?" Lorraine's voice came through as barely more than a whisper. "Please, just drop the court filing." I waited. "I'm afraid of what he'll do," she continued. "If you push this, if you keep going, things will get worse. For everyone." "Where are you calling from?" "That doesn't matter. Just listen. Things are more complicated than you see. You don't understand the situation." "Then explain it." Silence on the line. Not thinking silence. Trapped silence. "I can't," she finally said. "You just have to trust me. Drop the filing. Let this go." I set my coffee mug down carefully on the kitchen table. "Then explain the digital lock on your pantry door, Lorraine," I said, my voice flat and steady. "Explain why a 6-year-old needs to be locked away from food. 15 seconds of complete silence, not the silence of confusion, not the silence of someone trying to understand a question. There is a specific quality to the silence of someone who has been caught. It has weight texture, the density of suppressed truth pressing against the edges of a phone line. I have conducted enough forensic interviews to know the difference. Dad, The line went dead. I sat holding the phone for a long time, the dial tone droning in my ear, before I finally set it back in the cradle. She did not say, "What lock?" She did not say, "What are you talking about?" She did not ask me where I got that information or why I thought there was a lock on the pantry. She just went silent, the silence of someone who knows. I stood and walked to the window looking out at the dark street. Snow continued to fall. The neighborhood was quiet. Porch lights glowed through the white. My daughter knows that lock exists, which means my daughter knows why it exists. I thought about the night I showed up at that house. The way Lorraine stood in the shadows behind Brent, rigid and pale. The way she did not step forward, did not speak, just watched. I had wanted to believe she was afraid, controlled, a victim in her own right. But victims do not go silent when you ask about the mechanisms of their child's suffering. Victims ask questions. Victims express confusion or horror or denial. Lorraine expressed none of those things. She expressed the heavy, terrified silence of a partner who knows far too much. I walked back to the kitchen table and sat down. The DCFS petition sat in front of me, 23 pages of financial documentation and witness statements. Simone would file it in the morning. The machinery of the state would begin moving, and my daughter had just called from an unlisted number in the middle of the night to beg me to stop, not to explain, not to defend herself, not to claim innocence, just to beg me to stop looking. I sat staring at the dead handset for a long time, phone still pressed to my ear, even though the connection had ended minutes ago. In 35 years of forensic auditing, I had learned a fundamental truth about silence. There is the silence of an innocent person who knows nothing, and there is the heavy, terrified silence of a partner who knows far too much. Lorraine's silence was the second kind, and if my daughter knew about the pantry lock, the bedroom lock, the systematic isolation, then she was not a victim needing rescue. She was a co-conspirator who had already made her choice. The morning after Lorraine's call, I woke knowing my daughter had chosen her side. But grief is a luxury you set aside when a child's safety depends on speed. Simone's voice on this phone line at 9 a.m. carried the careful neutrality of a lawyer delivering news that cuts both ways. DCFS accepted the petition, she said. Senior investigator, not a trainee. They're taking this seriously. I sat up straighter in my home office chair. 72 hours, that's the window. Correct. They'll conduct an unannounced in-home inspection before the end of the week. It's unusual for intake to assign a senior investigator on first review that tells me the screener saw red flags she couldn't ignore. For the first time in days, I felt something like hope. Not the warm hope of a grandfather imagining reunions. The cold hope of an auditor watching the machinery finally engage. Finally, I said, the system is moving. Yes. But Vernon, while I was running the standard database sweep, I found something. The tone shift was immediate. Careful neutrality replaced by something harder. What kind of something? There's an anomaly in the system. A prior report from 3 weeks ago. Same household address. I stood without thinking. What do you mean, prior report? A DCFS intake report filed against Brent and Lorraine Rawlings on December 4, 2023. Suspected neglect, food insecurity concerning behavioral indicators. Mandatory reporter from Bright Futures Kindergarten in Skokie. My hand tightened on the phone. What was the outcome? Case closed December 15th, 11 days. What do you mean closed? They investigated and found nothing. No. Simone's voice went flat. I mean closed, as in terminated, as in someone made it go away. I was already reaching for my coat. Let me tell you how predators work. They don't just hurt children. They systematically dismantle every safety net designed to catch them. They identify the weak points in institutional armor, and they strike with precision. Brent had done this before, 3 weeks ago, and he had won. I drove to Simone's office in 23 minutes through midday traffic. She had the file open on her conference table when I arrived. "I pulled the full case record through legal request," she said. "It's worse than I thought." I sat down and read. The intake report was filed by a teacher at Bright Futures Kindergarten. Name redacted in the public version, but Simone had the unredacted copy through attorney privilege. The observations were clinical and devastating. Child repeatedly begs to take leftover snacks home. Child hoards food in cubby, concealing crackers and fruit in coat pockets. Child wearing clothes that no longer fit shoes, one size too small. Winter coat from previous season, with sleeves 3 inches above wrists. Child exhibits anxiety around meal transitions, asks multiple times if food will be available tomorrow. I read it twice. A teacher saw it, I said quietly. She filed the report, and they crushed her with a legal letter. Simone turned to the next page. 4 days after the teacher filed her mandatory report, the DCFS trainee caseworker assigned to investigate received this. She slid a document across the table. 10 pages. Letterhead from a corporate law firm in downtown Chicago. The kind of firm that charges $800 an hour. The language was aggressive and cold. Phrases like defamatory allegations, professional liability exposure, and vigorous legal action to protect our client's parental rights. The letter strongly advised the caseworker to close the matter immediately if she valued her professional credentials and wished to avoid becoming personally named in litigation. The caseworker was 3 months out of training. She panicked. On December 15th, she closed the file with a notation. Unable to substantiate claims. Family non-cooperative but within legal rights. Recommend closure. There is a particular rage that comes from learning someone tried to help and was crushed for it. Not the hot rage of impulse, but the cold rage of a man who knows exactly how to turn that suppressed truth into evidence. Brent beat the system once, I said. He thought he could do it again. He almost did, Simone replied. If you hadn't filed independently with 5 months of financial documentation, this would have stayed buried. I stared at the teacher's observations. Hoarding food, begging for snacks, coat sleeves 3 inches too short. Ellis had been crying for help in every way a 6-year-old knows how. And when an adult finally heard him, Brent deployed legal artillery to silence her. The teacher, I said. I want her name. Simone hesitated. Vernon, she's a mandatory reporter who got threatened with litigation. She might not want to relive this. I understand. But she needs to know her report wasn't wasted. That someone is listening this time. Simone pulled a separate sheet from the file. Briar Townsend, 26 years old, 5 years teaching experience. She filed the report on her own initiative after documenting concerns for 2 weeks. I wrote the name down carefully. Can we use this? I asked. The buried report, the legal intimidation, the pattern. Absolutely. This establishes that Brent has obstructed child welfare investigations before. It shows premeditation. And it gives us a witness who can testify to observable neglect from months ago, creating a timeline of ongoing harm rather than a single incident. Will she testify? I don't know. She tried once and got crushed. Asking her to stand up again is asking a lot. I looked at the file one more time. The teacher's careful documentation. The dates she logged each observation. The professional language of someone who knew what she was seeing and understood her legal obligation to report it. Someone had seen the signs. Someone had tried to speak up. And in 11 days, Brent's legal machinery had gagged her into silence. But Brent made one critical mistake. He assumed that silence was permanent. I closed the file folder and made a note in my ledger. I will find the teacher, I said. I will show her that her voice still matters. By the end of the week, I would be sitting across from that teacher watching her decide whether to stand up again after being knocked down once already. 7 days after filing the petition, I found Briar Townsend's name in a buried file. Within 48 hours, I would be sitting across from her, in an empty classroom, watching her decide whether courage was worth the risk a second time. But first, the system had to disappoint me. The DCFS field report arrived on Simone's desk, marked, "Insufficient grounds for emergency removal." And those 4 words made my blood pressure spike in a way 35 years of auditing corporate fraud never had. I read the document in Simone's conference room on a cold January evening. The senior investigator had conducted an unannounced inspection of the Skokie residence while I was legally barred from attending. The observations were clinical and damning. External padlock assembly on bedroom door. Digital combination lockbox installed on kitchen pantry. Child wearing short-sleeved summer shirt inside residence maintained at 18 degrees Celsius. No winter coat matching child's current size located in bedroom closet. Child appeared underweight for age bracket. Every detail I had reported. Every concern I had documented. All confirmed by a state official. Then came Brent's explanations recorded verbatim. Bedroom locked child has history of sleepwalking. Pediatrician recommended secured door to prevent wandering toward staircase at night. Pantry lock. Child diagnosed with severe tree nut allergies. Digital lock prevents unsupervised access to cross-contaminated food storage. Temperature family preference for cooler indoor climate. Child has never complained. Clothing child outgrew winter coat recently. Replacement ordered online in transit. The investigator's conclusion sat at the bottom of the page like a judicial slap. Concerns noted. Explanations plausible. Insufficient evidence for immediate emergency removal. Recommend continued monitoring pending full evidentiary hearing. I set the document down carefully. They saw everything, I said. The locks, the clothes, the temperature. And it still wasn't enough. Simone stood by the window, arms crossed. Brent gave medical explanations for everything. Food allergies, sleepwalking, thermostat preferences. The investigator had no medical training to contradict him. The system needs a smoking gun, I said. We gave them a loaded revolver, and they're asking where the bullet holes are. Here's what I learned. Auditing corporate fraud. For 3 decades, the system isn't designed to catch sophisticated criminals. It's designed to process obvious ones. Bruises, burns, broken bones. Evidence a jury can see in a photograph. Brent was running a different kind of abuse. Systematic, controlled, invisible to anyone who didn't know what financial manipulation looked like when translated into a child's daily deprivation. We need the teacher, Simone said quietly. I nodded. I already had her name. The following afternoon, I drove to Bright Futures Kindergarten in Elmhurst. The building was cheerful, primary colors and hand-painted murals, the kind of place parents trust without question. The receptionist told me Ellis Ashford had been withdrawn from enrollment 3 weeks prior. No forwarding school listed. I thanked her and waited in my car in the parking lot until dismissal. Briar Townsend, 26 years old and in her 2nd year of teaching, locked her classroom door at 3:45 with hands that hadn't stopped shaking since she'd filed a mandatory child abuse report 3 weeks ago and been threatened by a corporate law firm for her trouble. She walked toward the employee lot, winter coat pulled tight, bag over her shoulder. I stepped out of my car. Ms. Townsend, I kept my voice gentle. My name is Vernon Ashford. Ellis is my grandson. She stopped. Her face went pale. I can't talk to you, she said immediately. They told me I could lose my teaching license. They lied to you, I said, and I need 5 minutes to explain why. She looked around the parking lot. Empty. Just the 2 of us and the winter wind. 5 minutes, she finally said. Inside. We walked back to her classroom. She unlocked the door, and we sat in child-sized chairs designed for 6-year-olds. The walls were covered in art projects and alphabet posters. Watching a 26-year-old woman's hands shake because she tried to protect a child and was legally terrorized for it. That's when you realize the real crime isn't just what happened to the boy. It's what happened to everyone who tried to help him. Tell me what you saw, I said. She took a breath. Ellis was in my morning class from September through early December. He was quiet. Anxious. He always begged to take leftover cafeteria snacks home. Always. I started letting him pocket crackers because it seemed to calm him down. Go on. He hid food everywhere. His cubby, his backpack, his coat pockets. I found granola bars he'd wrapped in napkins and tucked under his art supplies. And once during free drawing time, he made a picture. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a folder. Inside, a child's crayon drawing. A house. A stick figure family. And over the front door, an enormous padlock drawn in thick black crayon. He drew a lock over his own house, she said quietly. A 6-year-old drew a lock where the door should be. I stared at the picture. The lock was 3 times the size it should have been. Deliberate. Emphasized. I filed the mandatory report the next day. Breyer continued. 2 weeks of documentation. The food hoarding, the anxiety, the drawing. 3 days later, I got a phone call from an attorney representing the Rawlings family. He told me filing false reports against upstanding clients could result in professional sanctions and civil liability. He used words like defamation and malicious intent. How old are you, Ms. Townsend? How old are you, Ms. Townsend? 26. And this is your 2nd year teaching? Yes. Student loans, she nodded. 53,000. So when DCFS closed the file 11 days later, you stayed quiet. I haven't slept right since I closed my mouth, she whispered. I see his face asking for crackers to take home. I see that drawing. I leaned forward. I'm reopening the case. I have a family law attorney who specializes in forensic custody disputes. Your original report is evidence, and this time you won't be alone. They'll come after me again. I'm not the state of Illinois, Ms. Townsend. I'm a grandfather with 35 years of forensic experience and a lawyer who doesn't lose. They cannot scare me. And if you stand with me, they can't scare you either. She looked at the drawing, then at me. What do you need? Everything you kept. Attendance records, contemporaneous notes, that drawing. And your testimony. She was quiet for a long time. Then she opened her filing cabinet. Breyer's filing cabinet held more than I expected. Attendance logs, behavioral notes, photographs of Ellis's cubby stuffed with hidden crackers. But a teacher's observations alone wouldn't be enough. I needed institutional failure documented in official records. 3 sealed boxes of subpoenaed files arrived at Simone's office that cold January morning. I approached them the way I'd approached every evidentiary audit for 35 years, looking for the pattern everyone else had missed. School records on the left, medical charts on the right. 9 unexplained absences per semester. That wasn't illness. That was deliberate isolation. Ellis was enrolled in the free and reduced-price lunch program at Bright Futures Academy, despite his household pulling 6 figures from the trust fund alone. Either Brent had committed application fraud, or he was keeping the child deliberately food insecure to justify the subsidized access. Free lunch program, Simone said, reading over my shoulder. For a family pulling in 6 figures from your grandson's trust fund. He's using poverty assistance while draining the trust, I said. That's not just cruel, it's systematic. The medical records were worse. 15 months without a single well-child checkup. Vaccinations delayed 4 months. A growth chart showing Ellis dropping from the 48th percentile to the 22nd over 18 months. Then I found the August 2023 emergency room admission. Triage nurse documentation, 6-year-old, male fatigue. Dizziness, apparent. Weight loss. Preliminary assessment, mild malnutrition, recommend social work consult. 4 hours later, the discharge summary read, picky eater, age-appropriate selectivity, parental education provided. Between intake and discharge, 1 chart entry explained everything. Attending physician consulted privately with father in hallway 15-minute discussion regarding patient dietary preferences. He bought the diagnosis, I said. Malnutrition flagged at intake, picky eater on discharge after a hallway conversation. Same pattern as the DCFS caseworker, Simone said. Same pattern as the teacher. Exactly. Brent intervenes privately. The observation disappears from the official record. That night I drove back to Evanston and opened my LLC monitoring files. I had spent 5 months tracking the money. Now I needed to track the people who let it happen. That's when I found Richard Keller, branch compliance manager. His signature appeared on 23 irregular trust distributions, each one manually approved, with a notation that it fell within acceptable fiduciary discretion. I pulled Brent's complete banking relationship, 4 commercial real estate accounts, all under Keller's division, generating approximately $180,000 in commissions over 2 years. I checked the probate court oversight forms, mandatory conflict of interest disclosure section, blank on all 23 approvals, undisclosed conflict of interest on a fiduciary account. Not just unethical, a federal banking violation. The OCC complaint would name Keller specifically. Whether he cooperated or defended himself was his own calculation to make. But his signature on 23 forms with blank disclosure sections was not a gray area. Federal banking examiners would treat it exactly that way. At 2 in the morning, I uploaded the whistleblower packet to the OCC Federal Reporting Portal. 5 months of verified data. Every transaction timestamped. Every conflict documented. The portal accepted the upload without acknowledgement. No confirmation. No case number. That's how federal whistleblower systems work. Silent intake, no paper trail. Just a massive, unstoppable machine that begins grinding the moment you feed it evidence. I closed the laptop. What I didn't know yet was that Brent had been preparing his own countermoves since the blizzard night, and one of them was already watching me. 3 days after I filed the OCC complaint, Brent's countermove revealed itself in my rearview mirror. The silver Honda Civic appeared on Tuesday morning as I pulled out of the grocery store parking lot, and I recognized it instantly for what it was: professional surveillance pretending to be invisible. I didn't speed up, didn't slow down, didn't signal that I'd noticed. I just drove home and carried my groceries inside. Wednesday, the same Honda held position 4 cars back during my afternoon drive to the hardware store. Thursday, it appeared in the library parking lot while I sat reading the newspaper. 3 days, same vehicle, different holding positions. Brent had hired someone to watch me. The surveillance was competent enough to fool a civilian, but completely obvious to someone who had spent 35 years tracking financial criminals. I refused to confront the vehicle or alter my behavior. Instead, I performed mundanity. In 35 years of tracking white-collar criminals, I learned this surveillance works both ways. If someone's watching you, you're also watching them fail to stay invisible. I went shopping. I sat on park benches. I fed ducks at a local pond for 20 minutes while the Honda sat 3 rows back. I took afternoon naps in my living room with the curtains open. The profile of a harmless, slightly confused elderly man. "They're logging my routine," I said Thursday night. Shopping, park visits, afternoon rest. The profile of a non-threat. While they watched me feed birds, every critical document was moving through Simone's encrypted channels. They were tracking a ghost. On Friday morning, I drove to Northbrook. The Honda followed. I parked at a coffee shop I'd selected because it was far from both Evanston and Skokie, neutral ground. I arrived early and selected a secluded booth in the back. Ordered coffee. Waited. Cedric Farrell walked in 20 minutes later, nervous, checking over his shoulder. 44 years old, wearing business casual, carrying the weight of a man who knows he's made a mistake he can't take back. He slid into the booth. I didn't offer pleasantries. I slid 3 pieces of paper across the table. "Document 1, I said. "Photocopy of your CPA signature on the most recent fraudulent trust fund accounting disclosure. September 2023. Cedric looked down at his signature, clear as daylight. "Document 2. Illinois criminal statute defining aiding and abetting financial fraud. Penalties highlighted in yellow. Up to 15 years. His face went pale. "Document 3. I placed Simone Garrett's business card on top. "My attorney's direct office line. Available 24 hours. Cedric stared at the documents. "You have 2 paths forward, Cedric," I said. "Both carry consequences, but only one leaves you with a career." "That's my signature," he said quietly. "I certified those reports." But Brent told me the withdrawals were legitimate distributions. He showed me invoices, receipts. I trusted him. What you were told is irrelevant, I said. What you signed is evidence. The question is whether you're a defendant or a witness. Flipping a witness is like auditing a leveraged balance sheet. You show them exactly how much exposure they're carrying, then offer them one clean path to solvency. Cedric picked up the statute page. Read it. Set it down carefully. We were roommates in college, he said. I've known him 20 years. I understand loyalty, I said. But loyalty doesn't survive a federal indictment. And that's where this is headed. He looked up. Federal. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency received a comprehensive whistleblower complaint 4 days ago. Banking violations, undisclosed conflicts, systematic fraud. When federal regulators move, state prosecutors follow. And when they start looking at professional certifications on fraudulent documents, they don't stop at the primary offender. Cedric's hands were shaking. I have a practice, he said. 2 employees. My daughters are both in college. If Illinois revokes my CPA license, then you lose everything, I finished. Which is why you need to decide right now whether you're going to be indicted or whether you're going to cooperate. He stared into his coffee cup. Nearly a full minute of silence. Finally, he looked up. I need to know exactly how much cover you can provide if I open up about everything. And there it was. The question I'd been waiting for. Not should I cooperate, but what protection do I get when I cooperate? He'd already decided. He was just negotiating the terms of his surrender. I can't promise immunity, I said flatly. I can't guarantee no professional sanctions. I can't make the exposure disappear. What I can promise is to document your immediate cooperation for the state prosecutor and the professional licensing board. I can show them you came forward before being charged. That documented timeline, cooperating witness versus indicted co-conspirator, that's the difference. How much difference between supervised probation and a federal prison cell? Cedric closed his eyes. I didn't promise to save his license, I said. I promised to document cooperation for the state prosecutor. That's the line between probation and an iron cell. He knows it. He opened his eyes and looked directly at me. 24 hours, he said. I need to get my affairs in order. 12 hours, I replied. And Simone's emergency cell number is on that card. By morning, I want copies of every email Brent sent you, every document he asked you to sign, every instruction he gave you about disguising those distributions. He'll come after me. He's already coming after both of us. The difference is, I'm ready for it. Cedric took the business card, stood, walked out without another word. I sat in the booth for another 10 minutes, finishing my coffee. By morning, I'd have access to internal accounting records my LLC monitoring system had never captured. Handwritten notes, backup files, email threads where Brent laid out exactly how to disguise trust fund theft as legitimate distributions. And somewhere in Evanston, a private investigator was filing a report saying I spent the afternoon feeding ducks and buying lettuce. Cedric delivered the files within 11 hours. Email threads, handwritten notes, backup accounting records showing exactly how Brent had instructed him to disguise the theft. 2 days later, I sat in a Cook County courtroom for the scheduling conference. The room was compact and fluorescent lit, built for administrative efficiency rather than drama. The presiding judge opened the file with the mechanical precision of someone who had processed 300 custody cases that year alone. Matter of Ashford versus Rawlings emergency custody petition. I'm appointing a guardian ad litem to represent the minor child's interests. Viveka Sinclair, 53, entered with the calm professionalism of a family attorney who had represented children in over 200 custody disputes and knew how to read what wasn't being said. Ms. Sinclair, full investigative authority. Report due 10 days before trial. Brent's defense counsel stood immediately. Your Honor, we need 60 days to review the financial complexities. 45 days, counselor. This involves a 6-year-old child. Full custody trial set for late January. I watched the attorney's jaw tighten. 60 days would have buried us in discovery requests and delays. 45 meant everyone was on a clock. 45 days sounds like nothing to a corporate attorney billing by the hour. To a 6-year-old sleeping behind a locked door, it's an eternity measured in terrified nights. During the court break, I watched Brent pace the corridor, typing furiously, making urgent calls. His veneer of control was cracking. I walked past without acknowledgement. Let him wonder. Let him panic. 6 days later, Viveka conducted her interview with Ellis at the Skokie house. A court order barred Brent and Lorraine from the bedroom during the conversation. They waited downstairs while she climbed the stairs alone. I wasn't there. But her report detailed everything. 20 minutes of gentle, age-appropriate questions. Do you feel safe in your room, Ellis? Sometimes, when they're not mad. If you could go anywhere, where would you want to be? He didn't answer, just looked at the floor. Before leaving, Viveka noticed a corner of yellow construction paper beneath the mattress edge. She retrieved it carefully. A child's crayon drawing. A square house with a triangle roof and chimney smoke. A long, jagged line stretching across the page. At the far end, another smaller square. At the bottom, in shaky printing, "Go here if scared." Ellis believed he could walk from his house to mine. He had no concept that I lived 40 miles away in Evanston. No understanding of highways or distances. He just knew, draw the path, believe someone will come. Viveka said nothing to Brent or Lorraine. She sealed the map inside her official GAL report and filed it directly with the court. That evening, I sat alone reading the report. Simone had included a high-resolution photograph of the drawing. I stared at it for a long time. The chimney smoke. The impossible road. 4 words in a 6-year-old's handwriting. He didn't know I lived 2 hours away. Didn't understand that children can't simply follow a crayon line to safety. He just knew that somewhere there was a house with his grandfather inside, and if things got bad enough, that line would lead him there. I tried to set the photograph down, but my hands wouldn't release it. He had hidden this under his mattress like contraband weeks or months ago, and believed with absolute certainty that it was enough. Every door Brent had locked had only made Ellis more determined to find the one person who would unlock them all. 4 days after Ellis's escape map surfaced in the GAL report, the OCC delivered its response to my whistleblower complaint. The certified letter from the bank arrived at the Skokie house on a Tuesday afternoon, and I would learn later that Brent's hands were shaking so badly he could barely tear open the envelope. I wasn't there to see his face. I didn't need to be. I knew exactly what that letter said. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency sent formal notification that Ellis's trust accounts and all interconnected corporate holdings had been flagged for emergency administrative review and were immediately frozen pending full investigation. I never saw Brent's face when the certified letter arrived, but I knew exactly what that letter said because I had written the complaint that triggered it. The OCC notification would have been cold, bureaucratic, and absolute. Every access line cut, every transfer capability suspended, every dollar locked behind federal oversight with no explanation and no timeline for resolution. I didn't need to watch him read it. I just needed to know it arrived. How did they? We were careful. In 3 decades of forensic work, I've learned this truth. Panic is the purest confession. When an innocent person faces accusations, they ask what they did wrong. When a guilty person faces discovery, they ask who told. 2 days later, Viveka Sinclair knocked on Opal Redmond's door as part of her standard neighborhood safety canvass. Opal invited her in and offered tea. What she described made Viveka's pen move quickly across her notepad. According to Opal's statement, the shouting had been audible through the shared wall on Tuesday afternoon, a man's voice loud enough to rattle picture frames repeating variations of the same question over and over. Who told them? Someone leaked the access codes. Lorraine's crying had been audible as well. Then a heavy impact against the wall. Then a car door slamming, tires pulling fast out of the driveway. Opal told Viveka she'd stood in her living room for several minutes afterward, too shaken to go back to her plants. She said she kept thinking about the little boy next door. 2 days later, Viveka Sinclair knocked on Opal's door. She was conducting a routine neighborhood safety canvass as part of her guardian ad litem investigation standard procedure to check for domestic disturbance concerns near the child's residence. Opal invited her in, offered tea. "I was just watering my plants when I heard the shouting," Opal said, settling into her armchair. "That poor little boy must have been terrified." Viveka pulled out her notepad. "Can you recall the exact words you heard Mrs. Redmond?" "Oh, yes. The man, Mr. Rawlings, he kept yelling, 'Who told them?' over and over, like someone had betrayed him. And something about access codes. Internal access codes, I think he said." Viveka wrote carefully. "And you're certain you heard, 'Someone is feeding them information'?" "Absolutely certain. He was so loud I heard it clear as day. Then he threw something against the wall, scared me half to death, and stormed out. Poor Mrs. Rawlings was crying the whole time. The best witnesses are the ones who don't know they're witnesses. They have no reason to embellish, no motive to lie, just the uncomfortable truth of what floated through thin walls on a Tuesday afternoon." "Is everything all right over there?" Opal asked. "With the little boy, that's what I'm working to determine," Viveka said gently. "Thank you for your civic awareness, Mrs. Redmond. This is very helpful." Viveka filed the witness statement in her sealed GAL report that afternoon. I read it that evening in my home office. The notation was clinical. Date, time, witness name, exact quotes. Opal Redmond had no idea she'd just provided documentation of Brent's consciousness of guilt regarding federal banking oversight. He wouldn't be panicking about being informed on unless he knew he was guilty of something worth reporting. He wouldn't be screaming, "Who told them?" unless he understood that someone had given federal investigators information he'd tried to hide. And he wouldn't be throwing furniture if he believed his explanations about legitimate distributions and medical necessities would hold up under scrutiny. I sat very still for a long time. Then I allowed myself the smallest, coldest smile. I didn't cause that shouting match. I didn't make Brent throw furniture or scream incriminating questions through walls his elderly neighbor could hear. I merely directed 5 months of pristine, verified data to the correct federal address and let the machinery of banking oversight do exactly what it was designed to do. Justice isn't a loud gavel or a dramatic confrontation. It's water dripping into stone, patient and relentless, until one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the rock finally splits wide open. And Opal Redmond, watering her violets, had just documented the exact moment the fracture became visible. 3 days after Opal Redmond documented the fracture, Brent made his move. The encrypted monitoring alert pinged my laptop at 11:30 on a Wednesday night, flagging an out-of-state legal filing. I'd configured the system to watch for the moment Brent's financial control collapsed, and there it was, exactly as I'd predicted, a Florida asset protection attorney filing emergency guardianship transfer paperwork. I opened the document and read it carefully. Miami-Dade County, Florida. Emergency petition for interstate guardianship transfer. Filed on behalf of Brent Rawlings by a specialized asset protection firm. Brent had retained an attorney to draft paperwork transferring permanent physical guardianship of Ellis to a third-party proxy guardian, a shell business associate domiciled in Miami with no prior relationship to the child. The legal structure would allow trust distributions to continue routing directly to the proxy's Florida accounts, while Brent voluntarily relinquished Illinois custody. He was selling his stepson's guardianship to liquidate the asset and disappear before the Cook County Court could issue permanent orders. "He's not just running," I said to my empty office. "He's trying to sell custody rights like a distressed asset." I read it again slower this time, recognizing every component. Transfer guardianship to a Florida proxy, keep the trust distributions flowing, and vanish before Illinois locks him down. In corporate fraud, the final play is always the same. When you can't hide the crime, you try to sell the evidence and disappear into jurisdictional gaps before prosecutors can freeze your accounts. I'd seen this play in corporate bankruptcies 100 times. Liquidate the liability offshore the assets and disappear into the paperwork. Brent thought Ellis was a balance sheet entry he could transfer to a Miami shell entity. I picked up my phone and called Simone's emergency line. She answered on the second ring. What happened? Brent just filed guardianship transfer papers in Florida. He's trying to sell custody to a Miami proxy before we can lock him down. Silence on the line. Then send me the filing. Now. We conferenced until 2 in the morning, mapping the counter-strategy. By 8 a.m., Simone was at the Cook County Courthouse clerk's office filing a synchronized dual-motion assault. We file list pendants first, she'd said during our call. Block the interstate transfer, freeze the real estate, lock every exit door. List pendens legal notice that the property was subject to pending litigation, preventing Brent from selling or transferring any real estate assets while the custody case was active. Then we hit him with ex parte emergency custody, everything we have all in one filing. Brent was playing checkers, move fast, jump pieces, run for the far row. We were playing chess, control the center, lock the flanks. And when your opponent finally realizes they have no legal moves left, that's called checkmate. The emergency ex parte custody petition was supported by a comprehensive evidentiary affidavit spanning 47 pages, 5 months of LLC bank surveillance stream, every transaction verified and time-stamped, the 14 blocked toy phone calls, digital forensics showing systematic signal jamming, the suppressed 2023 DCFS intake file, teacher's report, legal intimidation, 11-day burial, school absence records, 9 unexplained absences per semester, delayed vaccination charts, 15 months without well child checkups, the ER malnutrition report, diagnosis changed after Brent's hallway conversation with the physician, Breyer's teacher testimony, food hoarding, ill-fitting clothes, the drawing of a house with a padlock, Opal's neighbor witness statement, shouting through walls, consciousness of guilt, the GAL's sealed brief, Ellis's escape map with 4 words in shaky crayon, go here if scared, every piece cross-referenced, every date verified, every witness statement notarized. The presiding family court judge reviewed the emergency filing for 90 minutes, then scheduled an evidentiary hearing for 48 hours later. 48 hours, Vernon, Simone called to tell me. The judge is giving us an emergency hearing in 2 days. I drove home that afternoon and spread the complete evidentiary file across my dining room table. Every bank statement, every medical record, every witness testimony, every photograph of the escape map. I audited each piece a 4th time. I wasn't checking for errors. I wasn't doubting the data's integrity. I'd audited this material meticulously the first 3 times. I was doing what I always do before presenting the most critical case of my career, treating the evidence with the reverence it deserves, honoring the precision it took to build it, acknowledging that this 47-page affidavit represents not just 5 months of surveillance, but 69 years of learning exactly how to catch people who believe they're too smart to be caught. 48 hours, I said to the silent room. 2 days until the emergency hearing. I picked up the photograph of the escape map one more time. I had already stared at it for an hour the night Viveka filed her report. I didn't need to stare at it again. I just needed to remember why every line in this 47-page affidavit existed. Then I set it face down and went back to the ledger. Every transaction, every timestamp, every witness statement, this is the most important file I've ever constructed. This wasn't just another corporate fraud case. This was my grandson's life documented in a ledger that spoke louder than any words I could ever say in a courtroom. 48 hours. I went home and audited every ledger line a 4th time, not because I doubted the data's accuracy, but because this wasn't just evidence anymore. It was the most important file I'd constructed in 69 years of forensic work. Every transaction I'd tracked, every witness I'd secured, every document I'd preserved, was about to speak in a courtroom for a 6-year-old boy who'd drawn a map to safety with crayons and hidden it under his mattress because he believed against all geographic impossibility that his grandfather would come. And in 48 hours, I'd find out if 5 months of silent, methodical work could overpower 5 years of systematic abuse documented in plausible explanations. But before that emergency hearing could take place, Simone's legal team uncovered something that changed the entire moral landscape of the case. Buried in the subpoenaed email archive from 2 years ago, they found messages from Lorraine to a close friend, and her words revealed she wasn't Brent's victim. She was his knowing accomplice. The 48 hours collapsed to 24 when the subpoenaed email archive arrived early. The subpoenaed email archive arrived on day 37, 14,000 messages spanning 3 years, and Simone's paralegal found the smoking gun in the first 90 minutes. Simone called me to her office immediately. I sat across from her in the conference room while she opened the file on her laptop. "Before we go into the hearing tomorrow," she said, "you need to see this." She turned the screen toward me. Emails from Lorraine to a close friend. Dated 2 years ago. Long before the blizzard night. Long before I filed the emergency petition. Simone read the key passage aloud. "I know what he's doing with the money. But if I say something, I lose everything. The house, the lifestyle, him. And Dad would never forgive me if he found out I knew." I sat very still. Simone scrolled to another message. "There's more. She helped Cedric create false documentation. She coached Ellis on what to say if DCFS workers asked questions. Vernon, she wasn't a victim. She was an active participant." I remembered Lorraine, at age 12, sitting at the kitchen table doing homework, while Eleanor made dinner. She was meticulous even then, triple-checking every answer, terrified of making mistakes. That little girl became a woman who chose calculated silence over protecting her own son. "Vernon." Simone's voice pulled me back to the present. "I'm here," I said. "I know this is devastating, but it also strengthens our case. She knew, she participated, and she chose her lifestyle over her child's welfare." I nodded. I couldn't speak. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my home office staring at the photograph of Ellis's escape map until dawn. The emergency hearing began at 9 a.m. on day 38, Cook County Courthouse, Family Law Division. A courtroom smaller than I expected, filled with hard wooden benches and fluorescent lighting. Simone presented the evidence methodically. 45 minutes of clinical precision. The escape map found hidden under Ellis's mattress. A 6-year-old's crayon drawing showing an impossible walking route to safety. The 14 blocked toy phone calls. Digital forensics proving systematic signal jamming. The Florida relocation strategy documented in Lorraine's own emails. Her words, her choices, her complicity. The 15-month medical neglect timeline. No well-child checkups. Delayed vaccinations. An ER malnutrition diagnosis changed after Brent's hallway conversation with a physician. The corrupted 2023 DCFS intake report. A teacher's mandatory report buried in 11 days through legal intimidation. My hands started shaking halfway through Simone's presentation. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself. Simone noticed. Without breaking her presentation rhythm, she reached over and slid a glass of water in front of me. I didn't drink it. I just held the cold glass as an anchor. Brent's defense attorney stood. "Your Honor, if we could have time to review..." The judge cut him off mid-sentence. "I've reviewed the 47-page affidavit," she said. "I've seen the photographs. I've read the witness statements. I've reviewed the financial documentation and the email archive." She looked directly at Brent and Lorraine. "Emergency temporary custody is granted to Vernon Ashford effective immediately. Full evidentiary hearing will be scheduled, but the child will remain in the petitioner's care pending final determination." The gavel came down. Brent stood. His face was expressionless. He walked out of the courtroom in complete silence. Lorraine wouldn't make eye contact. She kept her eyes on the floor, hands trembling in her lap. I had won, but the victory tasted like ash. Ellis was brought to my house late that afternoon. A DCFS caseworker drove him from the Skokie residence to Evanston. He climbed out of the car, clutching a tiny backpack, everything he owned that they'd let him take. I walked down the front steps to meet him. He looked so small standing on my walkway. 6 years old, wearing a coat that was too thin for January. I knelt down so we were eye level. "Your room is upstairs," I said quietly. "Refrigerator doesn't have a lock. Pantry doesn't either." He stared at me for a long moment. processing, testing whether those words could be trusted. Then he nodded, once, small and careful. The caseworker handed me paperwork to sign, temporary custody orders, emergency placement protocols, follow-up appointment schedules. I signed everything. Ellis and I walked into the house together. He didn't say anything, just looked around with wide eyes, taking in the warm lighting, the unlocked doors, the absence of external padlocks and digital codes. I showed him his room. The bed Eleanor and I had bought years ago for grandchildren we thought we'd have under different circumstances. Clean sheets, a lamp on the nightstand, a window with curtains that could open. "This is yours," I said. "No locks. You can come and go as you need." He set his tiny backpack on the bed. "Are you hungry?" I asked. He nodded. We went downstairs to the kitchen. I made him a sandwich. He ate slowly, carefully, watching me the entire time, as if waiting for the moment when the safety would be revoked. It didn't come. He finished the sandwich. I offered him another. He took it. This was both an ending and a beginning. The end of 5 months of surveillance and legal warfare. The beginning of learning how to be a grandfather to a boy who'd been taught not to trust adults. That evening, after Ellis went to bed, I sat in my home office reviewing the custody orders. My phone buzzed. Email from Simone. Subject line: emergency filing. I opened it. Brent's attorney had filed an emergency motion to vacate the custody order 3 hours after Ellis walked through my front door. Attached, a sworn affidavit from a witness I'd never heard of. The allegation I had bribed a DCFS investigator in 1994, 30 years ago. A claim I'd never heard. A witness whose name meant nothing to me. I read the affidavit twice, completely fabricated, but sworn under penalty of perjury. Brent wasn't done fighting. He'd just changed tactics. I spent the morning drafting my response to the bribery allegation when my phone rang with an unfamiliar Chicago number. "Mr. Ashford, this is Malcolm Driscoll from Driscoll and Hayes Estate Law. I'm calling regarding a sealed directive your late wife filed with our firm 6 months ago." I set down my pen. "What kind of directive?" Mrs. Ashford established a conditional release protocol. The trigger condition was met yesterday when the Cook County Court docketed a custody dispute involving your grandson Ellis. Eleanor had been planning even from her hospital bed. "What's in the envelope?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss contents over the phone. Can you come to our office this afternoon?" 2:00. Malcolm Driscoll's office occupied the 14th floor of a Michigan Avenue building Eleanor and I used to pass on our way to Grant Park. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with the careful posture of someone who handled documents that outlived their authors. He slid a cream-colored envelope across his desk. My name in Eleanor's handwriting. She delivered this personally on June 3rd, 12 days before she passed. She was very specific about the trigger conditions. I opened the envelope. Inside were 3 items: a handwritten letter on Eleanor's monogrammed stationery, a manila folder containing printed bank statements I'd never seen, and a business card with a handwritten phone number. The letter began without preamble. "Vernon, if you're reading this, Lorraine or Brent has escalated to legal action regarding Ellis. I've been tracking concerning patterns for 18 months. You thought I was organizing photo albums those last months. I was documenting." The manila folder contained statements from accounts I didn't recognize. Cayman Islands, British Virgin Islands, Singapore, all showing wire transfers that corresponded exactly to the dates of the distributions from Ellis's fund. But these accounts had different beneficial owners listed. Shell companies. Eleanor had highlighted specific transactions in yellow. January $47,000 out of Ellis's fund. $47,000 into Clearwater Holdings Limited 3 days later. March $31,000 out, $31,000 into Pacific Rim Ventures. Every single withdrawal matched and tracked. How had she found these accounts? The letter continued. I sent preliminary information to an old colleague 18 months ago. He's retired FBI specialized in international asset tracking. His name is Arthur Caldwell. If you're reading this, call him. He'll have more current data than what I've provided here. I looked at the business card. Arthur Caldwell printed in simple block letters with a Virginia phone number, written below in Eleanor's hand. Mr. Driscoll, did my wife say anything else when she delivered this? She said you were the most honest person she'd ever known, and that when the time came you'd need proof that your instincts were correct. She was very calm, very certain. I drove home and sat at Eleanor's desk, the one I'd avoided for 6 months, because her reading glasses were still folded on top of her crossword puzzle book. I dialed Arthur Caldwell's number. He answered on the second ring. Caldwell. Mr. Caldwell, my name is Vernon Ashford. Mr. Caldwell, my wife, Eleanor. I've been expecting your call, Mr. Ashford. I'm very sorry for your loss. Eleanor was one of the most precise analytical minds I encountered in 30 years at the Bureau. She contacted me as a civilian consultant, the way certain people do when they have data that needs a proper home. I sat with that for a moment. Eleanor had always kept her own counsel. In 42 years of marriage, she had never needed my permission to be formidable. She sent you information about my grandson's trust fund. She did. 18 months ago, she sent me account numbers and transaction patterns that suggested a sophisticated layering scheme. I've been tracking this network since then. As of this morning, we've identified 17 shell entities across 6 jurisdictions, all connected to your son-in-law and one Cedric Farrell. 17 entities. Eleanor had found 3. What exactly have you been doing for 18 months? Building a case. The problem with international asset tracking is you need proof of intent, proof of coordination, and proof that funds are the same funds. Your wife gave me the first piece. The custody dispute you filed gave me legal predicate for the second. And your son-in-law just handed me the third piece this morning. What did he do, He moved $200,000 from a Cayman account into a Singapore entity at 4 a.m. Chicago time. That's a panic move, Mr. Ashford. People don't restructure offshore holdings at 4 in the morning unless they think someone's about to freeze their accounts, which means he knows you're closing in. I thought about the bribery allegation Brent had filed, the desperate swing of someone who realized his perimeter was collapsing. Can you trace where the original funds came from? Already did. Every dollar in those offshore accounts traces back to your grandson's trust fund through a series of intermediate transfers designed to obscure origin. Your wife documented the first layer. I've mapped all 7 layers. It's textbook money laundering, Mr. Ashford, and it's been running for 5 months. The same 5 months I'd been running my surveillance operation. Eleanor had been running her own operation for a year before that from hospital rooms and treatment centers, watching patterns while everyone thought she was resting. What happens now? Now I forward my findings to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network and the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. And you show your attorney everything your wife documented. Because what you've uncovered isn't just custody fraud, Mr. Ashford. It's a RICO predicate. I hung up and looked at the ceiling. My wife had engineered this operation from a sterile hospital room, enduring pain I'd never had the courage to ask about. She'd been charting data, building a perimeter around a grandson she'd never see to ride a bicycle. And she'd known exactly who to call when the time came. Arthur's words echoed 17 shell entities across 6 jurisdictions, but he'd said something else that made my hands cold. Brent moved money at 4 a.m. the morning after Ellis came to my house, which meant someone had told Brent exactly how much trouble he was in. Someone was feeding him information about my case. I had a leak. The leak didn't matter once I saw what arrived the next morning. Simone called at 7 a.m. Defense filed an emergency motion. You need to see this. I drove to her Michigan Avenue office and she played the video without preamble. Ellis sat on the living room couch I recognized from the Skokie house, his hands folded in his lap, his voice flat as rehearsed prayer. I want to stay with Mommy and Daddy. Grandpa is nice, but I miss my room. I don't want to live somewhere else. The camera angle was deliberate, framing him against family photos on the wall behind him. Brent's voice came from off-screen. And how do you feel about visiting Grandpa sometimes? That would be okay, but I want to go home. Ellis blinked twice, looked down at his hands, then back at the camera. His inflection never changed. The video ended after 90 seconds. Simone closed her laptop. It's coached. We both know it's coached. But proving it in front of a judge is different. I'd sat through 40 federal trials as expert witness, watched attorneys manufacture credibility from nothing, seen witnesses trained to deliver lies with perfect calm. But I'd never seen a 6-year-old forced to perform his own captivity with such mechanical precision. The absence of spontaneity was damning to anyone who knew children. The problem was convincing a judge who saw only a calm child expressing preference. His hands, I said. He never moves them. Children fidget. Ellis is holding still because someone told him to hold still. Defense will argue he's nervous on camera. Natural response to being recorded. Simone opened the motion filing on her screen. They're asking for immediate return of custody pending final hearing. Judge could grant temporary reversal based on this. I thought about Ellis's first night at my house, how he'd stood in front of the refrigerator for 5 minutes, just opening and closing the door because nobody stopped him. How he'd asked permission to use the bathroom. How he'd flinched when I reached past him for a coffee mug. Opal Redmond's security camera, I said. It faces the driveway between our properties. If they recorded this at the Skokie house, she might have the preparation on footage. Simone looked up. The rehearsal. Exactly. Get that footage. Get it today. I called Opal from the parking garage. She answered on the 3rd ring. Mr. Ashford, I saw your grandson playing in your backyard yesterday. First time I've seen that child smile. Opal, your porch camera. Does it capture video or just motion stills? Continuous recording. I keep 30 days rolling. What date do you need? January 23rd, afternoon. Come over at 2, I'll have it pulled up. Opal's living room smelled like Earl Grey tea and old books. Her security monitor sat on a desk by the window, 4 camera angles displayed in a grid. She clicked through to the archive. January 23rd. What time? Start at noon. Run it forward. The camera angle was wide, capturing her front porch and the entire side driveway that ran between her property and the Skokie house. At 1:17 p.m., Brent's car pulled into the driveway. At 2:47 p.m., Brent and Ellis emerged from the side door. Before I reveal what Opal's security camera recorded that afternoon. Are you still here right now? Comment. A, if you think it will prove coaching, or B, if you think it won't be clear. Add 1 reason. Please note what follows contains recreated details for narrative purposes. The timestamp on Opal's footage read 2:47 p.m. January 23rd, exactly 18 hours before the defense video was recorded. Brent knelt in the driveway, eye level with Ellis. He pointed at the boy's chest, then his own, then the house. Ellis nodded. Brent spoke no audio, but his mouth moved with intensity. He demonstrated something with his hands, then had Ellis repeat the gesture. The boy's hands came together, folded exactly as they appeared in the video. Brent checked his watch, spoke again, gestured. Ellis responded. Brent shook his head, gestured differently. Ellis nodded and repeated the corrected response. They ran through the sequence 3 more times. He's checking his watch, I said. Running the sequence again. Training him like an actor before curtain call. Opal leaned forward, her expression hardening. That's not parenting. That's puppetry. The footage continued for 8 minutes total. Brent adjusted Ellis's posture twice. He demonstrated the head tilt, the downward glance, the return to camera. He had Ellis practice the lines. I could read partial phrases on his lips. I want to stay. I miss my room. At 2:55 p.m., Brent stood, brushed off his knees, and led Ellis back inside. The driveway sat empty for the rest of the archived day. Can you export this file? I asked. Already done. USB drive is on the desk. I called Simone from Opal's porch. I have 8 minutes of Brent coaching Ellis through the entire video statement. Gestures, posture, timing, everything. It's all on camera. Get it to my office. I'm filing counter-evidence tonight. Simone submitted the rehearsal footage at 11 p.m. on day 47 with a motion to strike the defense video as coerced testimony. The court responded within 6 hours, emergency consolidated hearing, scheduled for day 50, all pending motions to be heard simultaneously. All allegations, all evidence, final custody determination. But the morning of day 48, Arthur Caldwell called. Mr. Ashford, federal update. The LLC that funded the Cayman account registered to your grandson traces back to Cedric Farrell as beneficial owner. Brent's name is nowhere on the paperwork, but the wire patterns prove coordination. We have enough for warrants. When? Timing is your choice. We can execute morning of your custody hearing or wait until after. Strategic question, do you want Cedric arrested before or after he potentially testifies? I looked at the calendar. Day 50 was 3 days away. Simone had subpoenaed Cedric to appear. If FBI arrested him before the hearing, defense would claim prejudice, argue we orchestrated criminal charges to intimidate their witness. If we waited until after, Cedric might flee once he realized federal investigation was active. Execute the warrants morning of the hearing, I said. Let them see what happens when you steal from a 6-year-old. Arthur's voice carried grim satisfaction. Warrants will be ready. I'll coordinate with local agents. I hung up and sat at Eleanor's desk. Day 50 would bring every thread together in one courtroom. The coached video, the rehearsal footage, the bribery allegation, the custody determination. And outside that courtroom, federal agents would be arresting the man who helped Brent engineer the entire theft. Eleanor had set this in motion 18 months ago. I was just following her blueprint to the last page. Cedric Farrell raised his right hand on day 50, and within 40 minutes detailed a $1.4 million offshore laundering scheme that transformed my grandson from victim into federal evidence exhibit. The federal arrest I'd anticipated never came. Arthur had negotiated cooperation instead. Cedric sat across the deposition table in Simone's conference room. Immunity purchased with complete disclosure. Simone worked through the timeline methodically. Mr. Farrell, you served as certified public accountant for the Ellis Ashford Educational Trust from August through December. Yes. You provided quarterly balance certifications to the trust administrator. I did. Were those certifications accurate? No, they were fraudulent. I certified balances that excluded distributions I knew had been made. At whose direction? Brent Rawlings. Simone slid a document across the table. Wire transfer records from the trust's primary account. Can you identify these transactions? Cedric studied the page. 4 wire transfers totaling $1.4 million, coded as investment management fees. The receiving entity was a Cayman Islands shell corporation registered under the miner's Social Security number. I'd analyzed shell corporation structures for 4 decades, testified in federal court about offshore vehicles designed to obscure beneficial ownership, but I'd never seen one carrying my own blood's Social Security number as the registration key. And you certified these transfers as legitimate trust expenses. I did, at Mr. Rawlings's explicit direction and under threat of exposure regarding my own previous irregularities. What are irregularities? I'd backdated certain tax documents 2 years ago. Brent discovered it and made clear he would report me to the state board unless I cooperated. Did you understand that cooperation constituted money laundering? Cedric looked directly at me. Yes, I understood exactly what it was. The court reporter's fingers paused mid-keystroke when Cedric said the dollar amount, and in that half-second silence I heard the case transform from family law to federal crime. The deposition continued for another hour. Cedric detailed the shell corporation's formation, the wire protocols designed to obscure ownership, the falsified investment reports. When Simone finally said, "No further questions," Cedric nodded once in my direction and left. "We have him," Simone said. "Federal money laundering wire fraud theft from a minor. Brent won't wait. No, he'll counterattack." On day 52, the defense counterpetition arrived at 6 a.m. Simone called before I'd finished coffee. "You need to come to the office. Now." The petition was 31 pages. Richard Holbrook, the defense attorney representing Brent and Lorraine, had a reputation for aggressive counter-litigation, always turning plaintiff credibility into the central battleground. He'd done exactly that here. The petition framed me as an unstable, manipulative, elderly individual using my grandson as a pawn in a vendetta driven by unresolved grief and deteriorating mental capacity. Attached were sworn declarations from 3 distant cousins describing my behavior at Eleanor's funeral as erratic. One mentioned confused names. Another claimed paranoid suspicions about medical staff. The third described angry outbursts, all true in the narrow sense that grief produces confusion. All false in the implication that confusion meant incompetence. The most damaging exhibit was my memory journal. The leather notebook Lorraine had given me 2 weeks after Eleanor's funeral, inscribed, "For the memories we keep." I'd used it to record moments with Eleanor mixed with daily notes. Simone read from the petition. "They're calling the memory journal evidence of deteriorating cognition. The gift Lorraine gave you to help with grief, they've weaponized it." She read Holbrook's language. "Exhibit F demonstrates ongoing cognitive impairment, requiring daily written prompts for basic task completion. Subject maintains detailed logs of routine activities, suggesting significant executive function deficits. Memory prompts include reminders to take medication, pay bills, and attend appointments consistent with progressive dementia presentation." I thought about Eleanor's voice telling me to write things down because grief makes the brain tired. "When they attack your competence, it means they've run out of facts," she'd said. "Schedule the full battery, Poisson. Neurological, cognitive, psychiatric. I want independent certification. This will delay the custody hearing by at least 2 weeks. He doesn't need to win the competency argument. He just needs procedural delay for Brent to move remaining assets offshore. Can you pass the evaluation?" I ran a forensic auditing practice for 30 years, managed complex federal testimony, and spent 5 months building an airtight case while maintaining operational security they never detected. "Yes, Simone. I can pass a competency evaluation." She reached for her phone. "I'll have it scheduled by end of business." I drove home and sat at Eleanor's desk. The memory journal was in evidence lockup, but I remembered what I'd written. Eleanor's laugh when she beat me at Scrabble. The way she'd fold grocery receipts into precise squares. Her handwriting on the sealed envelope with Arthur's name. Grief wasn't cognitive decline. It was the price of having loved someone worth remembering. On day 53, Arthur called. "Vernon, we have a timeline issue. FBI Financial Crimes is executing warrants against Brent and the Cayman Shell entity within 72 hours. But there's a legal problem. The competency petition." Exactly. If Holbrook convinces a judge you're incompetent, your entire whistleblower testimony to the FBI becomes legally inadmissible. Without your testimony establishing predicate knowledge, we lose foundation for the warrants. The case collapses. I looked at the calendar. 72 hours. 3 days to prove I was competent enough to destroy my daughter's life to save my grandson's. "When's the evaluation?" "Tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. Northwestern Neurology Department. Full battery cognitive neurological psychiatric. Results expedited for legal proceedings. I'll be there." Arthur's voice carried uncertainty. "Vernon, these evaluations are designed to find impairment. And you're 69 years old, 6 months out from losing your wife under extraordinary stress. Even competent people can test poorly under those conditions." "Then I'll test well." I hung up and opened my laptop. 18 hours to prepare for an examination that would determine whether my grandson remained property of thieves or whether I could finish what Eleanor had started from a hospital bed. The memory journal was evidence of grief. Tomorrow I'd prove grief wasn't the same as failure. The Northwestern evaluation took 6 hours. I passed. Simone filed the certification with the court on day 54 at 4 p.m. And Arthur confirmed the FBI warrants were clear to proceed. The federal freeze hit Brent's accounts at 9:47 a.m. on day 55, and by 10:15, Opal Redmond was calling Simone to report a man slamming his fists against a car hood in the Skokie driveway, screaming about blocked access codes. I was in Simone's office when her phone rang. She put it on speaker. "Simone, this is Opal. You need to hear this. Brent Rawlings just had a complete meltdown in his driveway. I have it on camera." "What happened?" "He came out of the house at 9:50, got in his car, then apparently tried to access something on his phone. He started yelling. Got out of the car, slammed both fists on the hood. Lorraine came out, and he was screaming at her about frozen lines and internal access codes. Then he just drove off." "She's still standing there." Simone looked at me. "The OCC freeze is complete. Every account, every shell entity, every wire pathway. He has no liquidity. How long until he realizes the access codes came from Eleanor's documentation? He already knows. That's why he's panicking." I thought about Eleanor in her hospital bed, writing down account numbers with shaking hands, sealing them in an envelope with Arthur Caldwell's name. She'd mapped the entire financial structure 18 months before Brent knew anyone was watching. By the time he discovered the surveillance, the perimeter was already closed. Simone pulled up the OCC order on her screen. "Freeze extends to all beneficial ownership interests in entities connected to the trust. Cayman accounts Singapore Holdings, the shell corporations Cedric testified about. Everything's locked pending federal investigation. What about the Florida relocation plan? Dead. He can't fund it. Can't wire deposits for property. Can't establish new accounts without triggering federal reporting requirements. He's financially immobilized." My phone buzzed. Text from Opal with a video file attached. I opened it. Opal's security footage showed a man watching his empire collapse in real time. Hands on metal shoulders, heaving wife standing 3 feet away like a stranger at a bus stop. Lorraine didn't move toward him. Didn't speak. Just stood there while Brent screamed at the sky, then got in his car and accelerated out of the frame. "Send that to Arthur," Simone said. Consciousness of guilt. Federal prosecutors love real-time panic responses to enforcement actions. I forwarded the file and sat back. Eleanor had engineered this moment from a hospital room. She'd known exactly where to put the pressure to make the structure collapse. The freeze wasn't just financial immobilization. It was proof that every move Brent had made for 5 months had been documented, cataloged, and transmitted to federal investigators before he'd even known he was under surveillance. 2 days later, Lorraine walked into Simone's office without an appointment. The receptionist called back to warn us, and Simone told her to send Lorraine through. My daughter looked like she hadn't slept. Her hands were shaking when she sat down across from us in the conference room. No attorney with her, no prepared statement. Just desperation in a navy blazer that didn't quite fit right anymore. "I'll testify against him," she said without preamble. "Everything. The offshore accounts, the coaching, all of it. I'll give you every detail. Just drop me from the civil suit." Simone's expression didn't change. "Lorraine, you need to stop talking right now and hire a criminal defense attorney. I'm trying to cooperate. Isn't that what you want? Your emails from 2 years ago make you a documented co-conspirator. You had full knowledge of the fund distributions. You participated in isolating Ellis. You helped stage the coached video testimony. Any testimony you give will be shredded by Brent's defense attorney. You need independent legal counsel immediately." Lorraine's hands were shaking when she made the offer, and for half a second I saw the 12-year-old who used to ask me to check her homework twice because she was terrified of making mistakes. But that girl had chosen silence over her son's safety 2 years ago. "Dad, please. I made mistakes, but I can fix this. I can help you." I looked at my daughter. 42 years old. Mother of the 6-year-old boy who'd stood in front of my refrigerator and marveled that it didn't have a lock. The woman who'd sent me a memory journal as a grief gift and then weaponized it as evidence of cognitive decline. "You can't fix this, Lorraine. The federal case doesn't need your testimony. Cedric already provided detailed sworn statements. Your participation is documented in subpoenaed emails. The only thing cooperation might achieve is reducing your sentence." "Sentence?" Her voice broke on the word. "You think I'm going to prison?" Simone spoke carefully. "I think you need a defense lawyer to protect yourself from criminal prosecution. That's not speculation. That's legal reality based on the evidence the FBI has compiled. And you won't help me." Lorraine looked directly at me. "You're going to let them prosecute your own daughter. I'm going to protect my grandson. Those are separate concerns. I'm your family. So is Ellis. And when you had to choose between his safety and your financial comfort, you chose the money. Now you're asking me to choose between your legal convenience and his permanent custody. I'm choosing him." Simone stood. "Lorraine, this meeting is over. You need representation before you say anything else." Lorraine stood slowly, looked at me one more time like she was waiting for me to change my mind. When I didn't speak, she turned toward the door, then stopped. "You should know something. Brent's meeting with someone tonight. A private investigator who specializes in offshore asset recovery and witness intimidation." She paused, hand on the doorframe. "He asked for Ellis's school schedule and your home address in Evanston." Simone's phone was in her hand before Lorraine finished the sentence. My daughter walked out of the glass office. I'd been her father for 42 years, but I'd been that boy's grandfather for 6. When those realities collided, I made my choice on a blizzard night in December. Simone was already dialing. "I'm calling Arthur. We need federal protection protocols, and I'm filing for emergency restraining orders within the hour." I looked at the empty doorway where Lorraine had stood. She'd warned me. In the wreckage of everything else, she'd given me that. It didn't change what she'd done. But it meant somewhere under the desperation and the legal calculation, my daughter still remembered who she used to be. Arthur had federal protection protocols in place within 4 hours. Ellis's school received notice my address was flagged in the FBI system, and any private investigator approaching would trigger immediate response. 2 FBI special agents in plain clothes walked into Simone's Chicago office on day 60, badges out, and the lead agent's first sentence confirmed that Eleanor's posthumous strategy had worked exactly as she'd engineered it 18 months ago. Special Agent Rebecca Morrison was mid-40s with the steady focus of someone who'd spent years tracking financial crimes through corporate shell games. Her partner, Special Agent Daniel Kincaid, was younger, quieter, holding a leather folder that looked familiar. Simone offered them seats. Rebecca declined. "This won't take long. We're from the FBI Chicago Field Office Financial Crimes Unit. We're here about the Ellis Ashford Educational Trust investigation." "We filed the OCC complaint," Simone said. "We know, but we didn't get this case from the OCC transfer. Your wife's routing brought this to our unit 16 months ago." Rebecca looked at me. Eleanor Ashford sent preliminary documentation to Arthur Caldwell, who forwarded it through proper channels. The OCC transfer last week made it active for prosecution, but we've been building the foundation since June of last year. Daniel opened the folder. Inside was Eleanor's original envelope, the cream-colored stationery with her monogrammed initials. "Your wife was remarkably thorough," Rebecca said, and I realized Eleanor had been protecting Ellis from what her hospital room had become a federal prison cell with morphine drips and evidence documentation. "The custody hearing is Wednesday," Simone said. "Will your investigation interfere?" "We won't interfere with family court, but we will need certified copies of every ledger, every wire authorization, every document you're submitting. Mr. Rawlings is facing federal charges independent of your custody claim." "What charges?" "Interstate wire fraud, money laundering, theft from a minor, structuring transactions to evade reporting requirements. The Cayman accounts give us federal jurisdiction. The coaching and isolation are your case. The financial crimes are ours." Daniel slid a document across the table. "Federal evidence request. We need certification that your documents are authentic. Once the judge rules on custody, we move forward with criminal indictment." Simone scanned it. "We can provide certification by tomorrow." Rebecca stood. "One more thing. If Mr. Rawlings approaches you, your grandson, or attempts any contact before Wednesday, call us immediately. Any witness intimidation becomes an additional charge." After they left, Simone and I sat in silence. "Eleanor built this," I said. "She routed the case 16 months ago. She knew how long federal investigations take. She timed it so the criminal case would activate right when we needed maximum pressure." Simone looked at the envelope. "Most people write goodbye letters." She wrote a prosecution roadmap. Night of day 62. I was reviewing the timeline when I heard Ellis's door open. He was sitting on his bed, hands gripping the mattress. "What's wrong, buddy?" "I can't sleep." I sat beside him. "Worried about tomorrow." He nodded. "What happens tomorrow?" "Grandpa, are you scared?" How do you explain to a 6-year-old that tomorrow a judge will decide if he's safe when he's already learned that locked refrigerators and escape maps are normal childhood experiences? "I am not scared." I said, "I am audited. I am fully prepared. 5 months of charts, every phone call logged, everything documented. I've been preparing since the night you called me on that toy phone." The blue phone that glowed. "Exactly. I kept every record. Your grandmother left me files. FBI agents are watching. Everything is accounted for." Ellis looked at me with those serious eyes. Does prepared mean we don't have to worry? I put my hand on his shoulder, felt how small he still was. Exactly. Now close your eyes. I need you sharp tomorrow morning. Okay. He lay back and I pulled the blanket up. The same blanket Eleanor had bought when we'd found out Lorraine was pregnant. Blue and white stripes. Grandpa. Yeah, buddy. Thank you for the refrigerator. I stayed until his breathing went steady. Then I sat in the dark hallway outside his door listening to him sleep. Tomorrow I would step inside a county courtroom and present the most critical file of my career. I'd testified in 40 federal trials, consulted on cases worth hundreds of millions, provided analysis that sent executives to prison, and dismantled fraud schemes spanning continents. But those were abstract assets, numbers on ledgers, corporate entities with no pulse. This was different. Unlike every corporate client I'd ever represented, this asset was sleeping safely above my head, breathing steady in a room with no locks on the doors, playing with toys he didn't have to hide, eating meals he didn't have to earn. I walked downstairs and looked at Simone's evidence binders. 5 months compressed into documentation a judge could review in 3 hours. Eleanor's 18-month investigation condensed into exhibits the FBI would use for criminal prosecution. All of it designed to protect one 6-year-old boy who'd drawn an escape map in crayon and believed he could walk to safety. I sent Simone a final email. Ready for tomorrow? All evidence verified. See you at the courthouse. Then I opened Eleanor's memory journal and read the last entry she'd written. Vernon, if you're reading this after I'm gone, remember being thorough isn't paranoia. It's love with a filing system. Protect our grandson. She'd been right. I walked downstairs at 6:30 a.m. on day 63 to find Ellis already dressed in the clothes we'd laid out the night before, sitting at the kitchen table with his backpack. He looked up and said, I want to tell the judge about the refrigerator. Simone had warned me this moment might come. I had exactly 90 minutes before we needed to leave for the courthouse. I told Ellis he didn't need to testify, that the evidence would speak for itself. The defense attorney opened by calling me a vengeful old man manufacturing evidence to weaponize my grief. And I sat in the Cook County courtroom witness chair on day 63, watching Simone project the first spreadsheet onto the screen, knowing the next 40 minutes would either save my grandson or destroy everything Eleanor had built. Judge Margaret Thornton presided from the bench, a methodical family court judge in her late 50s, known for her careful approach to complex financial abuse cases. She'd reviewed the case file in silence for 20 minutes. When she looked up, her expression was unreadable. Richard Holbrook stood for his opening. Your Honor, this is a man so consumed by grief and resentment that he's weaponized his own grandson to exact revenge on a family that moved on without him. Vernon Ashford lost his wife 6 months ago, and rather than process that loss, he's manufactured a conspiracy involving offshore accounts and fabricated abuse allegations. This is not protection. This is vendetta. Simone called me to provide expert testimony. I was sworn in and she projected the first exhibit. Trust deposit records color-coded by transaction type. Mr. Ashford, please walk the court through these financial records. I shifted into the clinical voice I'd used for 40 years. Trust deposit, July 15th, $47,000. Wire transfer, July 18th, to Cayman account, $42,000. Documented child medical expenditure, July through December, $0. Casino withdrawal, August 3rd, $8,500. Luxury SUV title transfer, August 9th. Florida resort charges, September through November, $12,000 coded to trust account. Simone advanced to offshore account statements. Your Honor, these are certified records obtained through federal subpoena. Each withdrawal from Ellis's trust corresponds to deposits in shell corporations registered in the Cayman Islands and Singapore. Total transferred $1.4 million. Mr. Ashford, in your professional assessment, what do these patterns indicate? Systematic conversion of protected assets for personal enrichment with zero allocated child welfare expenditure. I recited wire transfer routing numbers with the same flat precision I'd used in depositions for 40 years, but this time the 9-digit codes didn't represent corporate malfeasance. They represented the nights Ellis went to bed hungry. Holbrook cross-examined for 20 minutes, attacking my methodology, questioning my neutrality, suggesting the offshore accounts were legitimate investments. Every challenge I met with transaction verification and certified documentation. He had no foothold. Judge Thornton asked her own questions about trust structure authorization protocols, distribution timeline. I answered each with clinical precision while Brent sat at the defense table, expression locked. Then Simone played the video. Opal's security footage. 8 minutes of Brent kneeling in the driveway coaching Ellis through scripted testimony, pointing at the boy's chest, demonstrating gestures, running sequences again while checking his watch. The courtroom fell silent. When Opal's security footage played showing Brent drilling Ellis on his scripted lines, Lorraine turned her face away from the screen. But Brent watched without blinking, jaw set, taking notes like he was reviewing a business presentation. Simone called Viveka Sinclair. Ms. Sinclair, what did you observe during your interview with Ellis? The child had drawn a map labeled How to Run Away. He knew the street names between the Skokie house and his grandfather's residence. He'd planned the route. When I asked why, he said sometimes the locks made it hard to breathe. What locks? Locks on the refrigerator, the pantry, and his bedroom door controlled from outside. He said if he got too loud, the bedroom door would lock until someone decided to open it. Briar Townsend testified next. He hoarded crackers in his desk. When I asked why, he said the pantry at home had a lock, and he got hungry at night. He asked if all houses had locks on food. I reported it immediately. Opal Redmond described the driveway meltdown the morning of the federal freeze. I watched him scream at his wife that someone had leaked internal access codes. He was panicking because the money was frozen. She just stood there. Then he drove away and left her standing alone. The cumulative weight created suffocating silence. Video documentation of coaching. Guardian testimony about escape maps. Teacher reports of food hoarding. Neighbor logs of financial panic. Federal bank records showing systematic theft. Every defense argument collapsed under documentary proof. I returned to the stand for final questions. Mr. Ashford, how many federal cases have you testified in as expert witness? 43. How many involved offshore money laundering? 17. In your professional opinion, does the evidence meet the standard for criminal conversion of trust assets? Yes, it exceeds it. I delivered the ledger data exactly as I had to executive boards for 35 years. Tone remained flat. Eyes never drifted from the display. But inside my head, every integer represented a night that boy slept with stale crackers hidden under his mattress. Judge Thornton reviewed her notes for 3 minutes, then looked up. I'm calling a 15-minute recess before rendering my decision. We'll reconvene at 11:30. The courtroom emptied into the hallway. I stood near Simone while she organized exhibits. Across the room, Brent leaned toward Richard Holbrook with urgent whispers. Holbrook's face went pale, and he shook his head sharply. But Brent grabbed his arm and kept talking, voice rising enough that I caught fragments. Federal charges. Offshore access. Exit strategy. Through the gap in bodies, I saw Special Agent Rebecca Morrison stand up in the gallery and move toward the door phone already at her ear. The recess lasted exactly 15 minutes. When court resumed, Brent and Richard Holbrook returned to the defense table, but Rebecca Morrison didn't return to the gallery. Her absence registered like negative space in a photograph. When court resumed after the 15-minute recess, Simone's first question was deceptively simple. "Mr. Ashford, please state for the record the exact words Brent Rawlings said to you on the night of December 8th when you asked to see your grandson." I looked directly at Brent. He said, "The boy is asleep. Stop imagining things, old man." Those were his exact words. Simone advanced to the next exhibit. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence a photograph taken by Mr. Ashford at 2:18 a.m. on December 8th through the entry door gap at the Skokie residence." The image filled the courtroom screen. High resolution. Timestamp in the corner glowing green, 2:18 a.m. The photograph showed the bottom edge of a bedroom door from a low angle, as if taken from someone kneeling at the entry threshold. Through the half-inch gap between door and floor, a distinct beam of blue light shone through the darkness. Above the gap, clearly visible, was an external padlock mechanism mounted to the doorframe. The photograph filled the courtroom screen, that thin line of blue light under a door, with a padlock timestamp, glowing 2:18 a.m., and I watched Lorraine close her eyes, unable to look at the visual proof of what she'd allowed. "Mr. Ashford, what does this photograph show about whether the boy was simply asleep, as Mr. Rawlings claimed?" "It shows a blue light beam from a modified toy phone shining under a bedroom door with an external padlock. The boy was awake, and he was locked in." Simone let the image stay on the screen. "For clarity, Mr. Rawlings told you the child was asleep at 2:18 a.m., but this photograph taken at that exact moment shows the child was awake in a locked room, holding an illuminated phone he'd modified to call for help. Is that accurate?" "Yes. And the external padlock visible in this image, can that be operated from inside the room?" "No. It can only be locked and unlocked from the hallway." Brent dropped his head to the defense table. Not a gesture of remorse. A gesture of someone who'd just realized the evidence he didn't know existed had destroyed his last defense. Richard Holbrook stood. "Your Honor, I'd like to request—" "Denied," Judge Thornton said before he finished. "Continue, Ms. Garrett." Simone introduced the next exhibit. "Your Honor, the court should be aware of a prior civil case from Porter County, Indiana, filed in 2017. Certified records show that Brent Rawlings was sued for gross mismanagement of an incapacitated elderly woman's estate. The case settled under confidentiality seal, but our pre-trial motion to unseal was granted last week. She distributed copies to the judge and defense table. The Indiana case involved systematic withdrawal of funds from a vulnerable adult's account for personal use, while the victim's medical and care expenses went unpaid. The pattern is identical to the current case. Mr. Rawlings has done this before." Holbrook looked at the document, then at Brent. His expression shifted from professional defense to personal recognition that his client was a serial predator. "Your Honor, I need to request a brief recess to consult with my client regarding this new—" "Denied," Judge Thornton said again. "You've had adequate time to prepare, counselor. The pattern evidence is relevant and properly disclosed." She looked at the Indiana records. "This court notes that Mr. Rawlings has a documented history of financial exploitation, targeting vulnerable individuals unable to protect themselves. First, an incapacitated elderly woman, now his own 6-year-old son." Lorraine sat motionless when the judge reviewed the custody order, and I realized I'd been waiting 42 years for my daughter to choose her son over her comfort. But the waiting was over, and she'd made her choice years ago. Judge Thornton set down her notes and looked directly at both legal teams. The evidence of neglect and trust conversion is substantial, meticulously documented, and absolute. The video evidence of coached testimony demonstrates deliberate manipulation of the child for litigation advantage. The financial records show systematic theft exceeding $1.4 million. The witness testimony establishes a pattern of isolation, food restriction, and psychological control. She turned to me. Permanent sole custody of Ellis Ashford is awarded to Vernon Ashford effective immediately. Mr. and Mrs. Rawlings's parental rights are suspended pending criminal proceedings. All visitation is denied until further court order. Holbrook started to stand, but Judge Thornton continued. Mr. and Mrs. Rawlings are ordered to make full restitution to the trust. Local assets totaling $847,000 are hereby attached and will be transferred to the reconstituted trust account. The $1.4 million in offshore accounts will be subject to federal seizure proceedings currently underway. Signed the order. The sound of pen on paper seemed louder than it should have been. This court finds that both parents engaged in willful, systematic financial exploitation and deliberate emotional abuse of a minor child. The custody transfer is permanent. Mr. Ashford, you have full legal and physical custody. Ellis will remain in your care indefinitely. I'd won the legal case, but the truth was I'd lost my daughter long before we stepped foot inside the courthouse. Judge Thornton's signature was merely the day I had to stop pretending otherwise. The bailiff escorted Brent and Lorraine from the courtroom. Brent walked with his shoulders set, still performing control. Lorraine looked back once, not at me, but at the empty witness stand where I'd delivered 40 years of forensic expertise to save her son from her choices. Then they were gone through the side door. Simone was organizing exhibits back into binders when Special Agent Rebecca Morrison appeared at our table. She was holding a manila envelope marked in red ink, urgent, FBI Financial Crimes. "We need you both at the field office within 2 hours," Rebecca said. She looked at Simone, then at me. "There's a third account we just found. Wire transfers are still active. Someone's been moving money out of Ellis's trust this morning during the hearing." Simone's hand froze on the binder. "This morning, the accounts are frozen. The Cayman accounts are frozen. This is a different structure. Singapore corporate shell with a beneficial owner we didn't identify until an hour ago. Whoever's operating it knows the freeze is coming, and they're liquidating fast." "Who's the beneficial owner?" I asked. Rebecca's expression was grim. "That's what we need to discuss at the field office, because the wire authorizations have a signature we weren't expecting." The case wasn't over. The FBI meeting resolved the third account within hours. Lorraine had been the unexpected signature, making a final transfer before the freeze completed. I brought Ellis home on the evening of day 63 and set about preparing the simplest dinner I knew. Roast chicken potatoes, green beans, because grand celebrations felt wrong when the boy sitting at my kitchen table still flinched when I opened cabinet doors. The kitchen had warm yellow overhead lighting that Eleanor had insisted made everything feel safer. Ellis sat at the wooden table, hands folded, staring at the full plate like it might disappear. "You don't keep a combination lock on the pantry, Grandpa." I set my fork down. The question wasn't curiosity. It was threat assessment from a 6-year-old who'd learned to map danger before comfort. "I will never put a lock on food in this house, son. There is never a reason to do that." He absorbed the statement, quietly nodded, and picked up his fork. He ate the way Eleanor used to describe wounded animals moving through unfamiliar territory. Slow, deliberate testing each step before committing weight. And I realized safety wasn't something you declared, it was something you proved over time. He cut the chicken into precise pieces, tried the potatoes first, then green beans, one at a time, rationing resources that might run out. When he finished, he set his fork down parallel to the knife and looked at me. "Is there more?" "Always." I served him a second helping without ceremony. He ate it faster than the first. Not rushed, just less afraid. When he finished, he carried his plate to the sink, rinsed it carefully, and set it in the dish rack. "Can I go upstairs now?" "Of course, your room is yours, Ellis. You don't need permission to be in it." He walked toward the stairs, then stopped. "The door doesn't lock from the outside." "No, and it never will." He nodded and went upstairs. I heard his footsteps above my head, heard his door close softly, not latching, just closing most of the way, and I sat listening to the house settle around us. 2 weeks later, Simone called with the federal resolution. I was reviewing the reconstituted trust account statements. "Federal grand jury indictment came through," she said. "Brent's facing multiple counts of wire fraud and international money laundering. Total $2.1 million. Statutory maximum 20 years federal penitentiary. His bank compliance credentials permanently revoked by the OCC." I wrote the numbers down. 20 years, 2.1 million, permanent revocation. Lorraine took a plea agreement. 3 years supervised probation contingent on full asset forfeiture and lifetime ban from managing fiduciary assets. She signed this morning. And Cedric, 2 years federal probation. His cooperation bought leniency, but he'll never work as a CPA again. Should I have felt vindicated hearing that Brent would spend the next 2 decades in federal prison, that Lorraine had forfeited everything she'd chosen over her son? Thank you for the update, Simone. Vernon, this is a complete victory. Federal prosecution, full restitution, permanent custody. Thank you, I said again and clicked off. I sat looking at the legal pad. 20 years for Brent. 3 years probation for Lorraine. 2 years for Cedric. The numbers should have meant something. Vindication. Justice. Closure. But all I felt was completed ledger work. Numbers balanced. Accounts reconciled. Case closed. Upstairs, I heard Ellis moving around. Not cautious silence, but ordinary sounds of a child playing. A toy dropped. Footsteps. Soft voice talking to himself while building with blocks. People would ask me later if I felt justice had been served. I didn't know what abstract justice felt like. I knew my refrigerator was stocked, and Ellis could open it without asking permission. I knew my grandson didn't clear crumbs from the table to hide under his pillow anymore. I knew he'd asked for a second helping at breakfast without apologizing for being hungry. To an old auditor, that was the only balance sheet that mattered. The federal sentences were footnotes in someone else's story. My story was upstairs, learning that doors could stay unlocked, and food could stay accessible, and 6-year-olds could make noise without consequence. 3 months later, on the first warm spring day, I found Ellis in the backyard trying to assemble Eleanor's old bicycle from the garage. The one she'd bought years ago for grandchildren she'd never meet. Blue and silver, child-sized, with training wheels still in the box. He was sitting cross-legged on the grass instruction manual spread in front of him, front wheel lying on its side. He looked up when I approached. "Grandma left this for me, didn't she?" I knelt beside him with the wrench. "Yes. She bought it 2 years ago. Said she wanted to be ready." "Ready for what?" "For you." He looked at the disassembled bicycle, then at me. She knew I'd come live with you. She knew if you ever needed her, she'd find a way to help, even if she couldn't be here to do it herself. I helped him attach the front wheel, showed him how to tighten the bolts in a star pattern. He watched my hands, then tried it himself. Small fingers gripping the wrench with concentration. And for the first time since the blizzard night, I felt Eleanor's presence not as absence but as architecture. She'd built this. The bicycle in the garage, the sealed envelope with Arthur's name, the 18 months of documentation from a hospital bed. All designed so that when the moment came, the foundation would hold. We worked in silence for 20 minutes, assembling the bicycle piece by piece. When it was done, Ellis stood back and looked at it with wonder. "Can I try it?" "That's what it's for." He climbed on feet, barely reaching the pedals, and I held the back of the seat while he found his balance. Eleanor would have loved this moment. And somehow, in the spring sunshine and the careful engineering of a grandmother's love, she was here for it anyway. The bicycle hung in the garage now, waiting for warmer days, when the sidewalks cleared. On a bright winter morning in mid-February, I swept beneath Ellis's bed frame during routine cleaning and found nothing. No hidden wrappers, no hoarded crackers, no emergency supplies tucked into shadows. And that empty space beneath the mattress felt like the most significant audit result of my entire career. I checked the dresser drawers next. Clear. Just clothes folded the way I'd shown him socks, paired and rolled. I opened his backpack hanging on the door hook. Pencils. Drawings of bicycles and houses with unlocked doors. A library book about planets. No concealed food. No survival cache. The absence of fear. That's what recovery looks like. Not dramatic transformation, just empty space where survival instincts used to be. From downstairs, I heard small feet running across the kitchen floor. "Grandpa? What are we making for breakfast today?" No hoarding, no concealment, just secure expectation that a reply would come. "Pancakes," I called down. "Come help me measure the flour." His footsteps thundered back up the stairs to wash his hands first. The routine we'd built over 3 months. Ask, answer, participate. Simple architecture that held because neither of us had to guard against collapse. The letter from Lorraine arrived a week later. Out-of-state return address. Probation monitoring office forwarding service. I opened it at my desk while Ellis was at school, the morning light coming through Eleanor's curtains in clean February angles. 4 pages, handwritten, her penmanship still precise despite everything. She wrote about overwhelming fear and losing her way so gradually she didn't see the dark until she was standing in it. She wrote about the moment in the courtroom when she saw the photograph of the blue light under the locked door and realized what she'd become complicit in. She asked if an apology could still hold weight when the damage was already done. Lorraine's letter sat in the drawer like a door left unlocked but closed. I wasn't ready to walk through, but I wouldn't bar it with deadbolts either. I read it once, didn't reread, folded it cleanly along the original creases, and placed it in the lower desk drawer without destroying it. She was asking if forgiveness was possible. I didn't have that answer yet. Maybe I never would. But I wouldn't destroy the letter. That door stayed unlocked even if it remained shut for now. Eleanor would have said something about leaving room for people to grow back toward the light. I wasn't Eleanor, but I could leave the drawer unlocked. The next day I moved Ellis's bed frame away from the wall to clear the winter dust that accumulated in corners. The frame scraped across the hardwood with a sound that made me wince, hoping I hadn't scratched Eleanor's floors. That's when I saw it. A tiny scrap of notebook paper wedged into the narrow slit where the wooden side rail met the headboard. I worked it free carefully. The paper was wrinkled soft with age, covered in shaky kindergarten printing, done in blue crayon. "Grandpa will come," he promised. In the upper margin, a date written in what looked like Lorraine's handwriting before she'd stopped helping him with homework. October 15th, 2023. I sat on that dusty floor, holding a scrap of paper with misspelled hope, and understood that sometimes rescue isn't about having a plan. It's about showing up for someone who already believes you will. 2 months. He'd written this 2 months before he called me on the blizzard night. 2 months before I drove through whiteout conditions thinking I was launching a rescue operation. Ellis had held absolute conviction that I would come before any rescue even began. I thought I was saving him, but he'd already decided I was coming. His faith was the architecture. I just showed up to build on the foundation he'd laid in crayon on notebook paper hidden where his parents wouldn't find it, but where he could see it every night before sleep. The promise he believed I'd made just by being his grandfather. I folded the note carefully and placed it in my wallet behind my driver's license. Some evidence you carry differently than court exhibits. That Sunday morning, I was brewing coffee in the kitchen while Ellis sat at the island, turning pages of an illustrated book about space exploration. Peaceful silence. The kind Eleanor used to call companionable quiet, where two people could share a room without needing to fill it with noise. Ellis closed the book and looked up. "Grandpa, when you were little like me, were you really good at math?" I thought about 35 years at Deloitte. 5 months of encrypted surveillance logs. The massive paper wall of evidence built to purchase the safety of the boy sitting in front of me. "Yes, buddy. I was very sharp with numbers." "Why do you ask?" He smiled. The gaps where baby teeth used to be made it crooked and perfect. "Because I want to be exactly that sharp when I grow up." I poured my coffee and looked out the window at the clean February snow covering the backyard. The bicycle would come out in a few weeks when the ice melted. Spring would arrive, and we'd practice in the driveway until he didn't need training wheels anymore. Ordinary future planned in coffee steam and Sunday silence. Bloodlines create family on legal certificates. But choosing to drive 2 hours into whiteout blizzard building forensic files in total silence sitting on dusty floors, holding wrinkled notes, those metrics forge family in the chest. That is our ledger. One call, one winter storm, and a folder of numbers that spoke far louder than any voice I ever raised. "You want to help me make waffles instead of pancakes?" I asked. "I can show you how to work the waffle iron." "Yes," Ellis said, already sliding off the stool. "And can we put blueberries in them?" "We can put anything you want in them. That's the benefit of making breakfast at home. No restrictions." He grinned and opened the refrigerator, no lock, no hesitation, and pulled out the carton of blueberries we'd bought together at the store 3 days ago. I watched him measure ingredients with careful precision, tongue between his teeth in concentration, and thought about Eleanor. She'd engineered all of this from a hospital bed. The sealed envelope, the FBI routing, the 18 months of documentation that became the foundation for everything that followed. She'd known exactly what to build and where to place the load-bearing walls. This morning, Sunday waffles and blueberries and a boy who wanted to be sharp with numbers was her blueprint made real. I was just the contractor who showed up to finish the work. And that was enough. And to you listening to my story, remember this: sometimes the people who need you most can't ask for help directly. Looking back, I wish I'd trusted my instincts sooner. I saw the signs, the blocked calls, the canceled enrollments, the numbers that didn't add up. But I hesitated because she was my daughter. I wanted to believe her explanations. Don't make my mistake. When something feels wrong with someone you love, especially a child who can't defend themselves, trust that feeling. Document everything. Act before it's too late. The lesson I learned isn't just about forensic accounting or legal strategy. It's about showing up. Ellis wrote that note 2 months before he called me, "Grandpa will come." He promised me. Because somewhere in his 6-year-old heart, he believed I would be there when he needed me. And I believe God put me through 35 years of tracking money for corporations, so I'd have exactly the skills I needed to save my grandson. Faith isn't passive. It's the wrench in your hand while you assemble a bicycle. It's choosing action over comfort. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment below. These grandpa stories matter because they show what it means to fight for family. Have you ever had to choose loyalty over truth? Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more grandpa stories about protecting the ones we love, subscribe to Dad's Revenge Stories. Your support keeps these stories alive. Thank you for staying until the very end. Final note: this story contains fictionalized details for storytelling and reflection. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental. What matters is the message about protecting the vulnerable.